Welcome, everyone, to the February 22nd, 2021 Board of Education meeting, a joint meeting of District 65 and District 202 Boards of Education. Can we have a roll call of District 65, please?
Yes. Lindsay Ryan.
Here.
Mendoza.
Here.
Cartha.
Here.
Halpern.
Here.
Kim.
Here.
Hernandez.
Here.
Tanya Booty.
Here.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call for 202, please?
Laudade.
Here.
Livingston. Here. Munsell. Here. Parsons.
Here.
Rolowitz.
Here.
Toterich.
Here.
Savage Williams.
Here. Thank you. All right. So welcome all. So our first agenda item is Board and Superintendents Comments. So let's see. I think it makes sense for 202 to start with Dr. Witherspoon. Would you like to start us?
Well, I will, and to the entire District 65 board and staff, welcome to ETHS. I guess since we're hosting, it's a little weird compared to normally. I want to give a special hello to Dr. Horton. I've just so enjoyed working with him since he came, even before he was official, starting way back many months ago. But this is our first joint meeting together. We've been in a lot of other settings together, but here we are. And I just really appreciate the chance for us to get together with all of you. I know that we're two separate districts, and I know that we have separate schools and we have separate age groups even, but it's all Evanston-Skokie. It's all the people who attend our schools, and it's all the same families and children. And you have a lot of children in your district that we haven't seen yet, but we know that they're headed our way. And we also know that we have a school already filled with what I'll call District 65 alums. And believe me, we love seeing how they just grow and flourish in the 4 years that we get to have them too. So welcome, and looking forward to a good meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Witherspoon. And so I will also extend a welcome. It's just it's an odd way to welcome you. I wish I could show you the school, Dr. Horton. It's really a nice school, and our board meeting and our boardroom and all of that. But this is the best I can do. But welcome to this board meeting, and welcome to Evanston. I know you've been here a while, and it seems odd, but I haven't really had a chance to say that to you. So I'm really glad you're here. And to the other board members, some of you I've worked with for several years. Sula, I have not. So I'm really glad to see you and officially meet you. So welcome. And I look forward as well to the work that we will do together. It's really important for our two districts, and I know this is happening. It's important for us to talk together, to articulate together various departments, and I know that happens between various departments, and this is the opportunity for the board to do that with our colleagues, not even across town, but kind of around the corner when we're together. We're close. So welcome. I look forward to some really good discussion tonight.
All right.
And yes.
President Booty, is you or me?
Dr. Rowan, you can go ahead, and I have some comments after you're done.
All right. Thank you. Again, I've had a chance, of course, to work with Eric quite a bit on a few things, and thanking you all for welcoming me to this chance for us to collaborate. And I see nothing but opportunity for us in so many levels. While we're here for the joint literacy, I do know and I do believe that there are other great ventures ahead. As I've been talking with Dr. Campbell and some of the environments around the equity work, around our college career readiness work, like I'm really excited to be able to venture on that. And then I would just like to say, for our community, we have children back in school, and that feels so good, you know. And we know there's a difference between high school right now, especially with what the data is saying. And we have our elementary and middle schools. About half of our students are back. And I just want to, you know, say congratulations to everyone on our team and the community and our board for working with us to be able to make that happen. And there's a lot for me to continue to learn from Dr. Witherspoon and his work and from the board leaders at 65 as well as 202. And just excited to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Horton. And an extension of gratitude as well from myself to 202 for hosting us tonight. I think, you know, it's a critical value for us to not only name, but actually put into action that it truly takes a village to raise children. And we are a part of that village, and all of the children of 65 and 202 are, important to all of us and are a priority for all of us. And taking the time to put that into action by having a joint literacy goal and then following through on discussing it and looking for those other opportunities to collaborate and learn from each other and work together is critical for our own independent progress and learning as separate institutions, but also so critical for our community. So I thank you all for hosting us, Dr. Witherspoon and Dr. Horton. I thank you all for your collaboration and your humble leadership that allows for us to be able to make the kind of progress and collaborating that we need to make on behalf of all the children and families of District 65 and 202. So beyond that, I did also want to read a comment that is, I think, relevant to our District 65 community, but also may feel relevant to our District 202 community. I'm going to read some language that I've shared with a number of folks who have reached out to our board about reopening schools and about remote learning. One, I want to say that I and many of us on our board approach this work as parents in the district. And so I have, as a mother, a working mother of 3 children, 2 of whom were remote learning, I understand the challenges that remote learning presents for children and families. As such, it has consistently been the stance of the District 65 board and administration to monitor remote learning indicators, engagement, and progress. And we have consistently been committed to reopening our schools with safety metrics that were established by scientific research, IDPH guidance, and the input of a medical advisory group that was established in December of 2020. And we, in fact, have reopened last week, bringing back every elementary age child that indicated a preference for in-person, and all of the vulnerable middle school populations that indicated a preference for in-person. We were not able to bring back every middle school student, despite the fact that we would have liked to, because of space restrictions in our buildings. And while, it would be lovely if COVID as a restriction disappeared and we could put everyone back in the building, it is simply not safe for us to fill buildings with bodies right now. And so we do need to maintain restrictions in terms of physical spacing. And thankfully, while maintaining those restrictions, we have still been able to bring back all of the middle school populations who indicated that they were vulnerable according to the 5 categories a vulnerability that we identified. And I want to continue to invite the public that has any concerns about their children's experience of remote learning to reach out to us and let us know what those specific needs are so that we can deploy the resources that we have available to support children and families in order to respond to those needs. Because everyone's wellness and learning is a priority for District 65. And we cannot, because it takes a village, we do need to be communicating with one another about what those needs are in order to meet them. And that's all my comments for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anya. All right, so we're going to go right ahead with our agenda. The first item on the agenda that I have is comments from the public. Dr. Bavis, where are you? There's so many people on this call. Dr. Bavis, how many public comments do we have?
Let's see. We have, I believe it's 50, over 50.
Okay. All right. So we have over 50 public comments from the community tonight. So given the need for our boards to conduct our business, I'm going to follow our policy. District 202 has a policy for public participation at board meetings. It's policy 2.230, and I'm going to read from that policy. It says, ordinarily comments are limited to 3 minutes. However, the maximum period for citizen participation is 60 minutes. So if there are more than 20 speakers, and we're not in person, so 20, I'll say 20 comments, the board president will allocate time for these comments to ensure that that they don't exceed more than 60 minutes. So what we're going to do is observe the 60 minutes in order to get the maximum amount of speakers. I've asked our board secretary, Dr. Bavis, to read as many of these letters as he can within the 60-minute period. So that means that we'll have a little bit more than 1 minute. So we won't be able to read all of the letter. However, I would like to say that these are public comments. So the entire letters will be on our website. So they will be a part of the board meeting so that they can be reviewed in their entirety by the public and will be reviewed by board members. Okay.
Thank you, President Savage Williams. What I'm going to do is it's about 1:30. Some of the comments are very short, so I believe I can do 1:30 and get it done. But I would ask that we have someone look at the time, 7:16, and then just I'm going to try. I'm timing them myself and I'm reading them myself. But I will need someone to interrupt me, maybe a Madam President at 8:18 to keep with our goal.
Okay, I will do that.
And they all will be published in their entirety on our website, in the board tab of the website. All right, ready?
Ready.
Strap yourselves in. Here we go. Number 1 is from Matt Pierce. Dear District 65 School Board, I'm a parent of a 6th grader at Haven, and I humbly request that you reopen the middle schools to all students who want to return to in-school learning. While my son has gotten good grades during remote learning and appears to be doing quite well, there is so much that he and other kids should be learning. As an example, during the recent material covered the last round of math tests, the teacher had to cover even half of the topics that were on the test, and we're approaching 2/3 of the way through the year. My son did not do nearly as well on the test as he had in the past, jumping from the 80th percentile to the 50th percentile, as is simply because teachers don't have the time, resources, and online environment. to cover even half of the necessary topics. Respectfully, I think you and the teachers realize this, and I think public opinion and scientific opinion has swung dramatically in favor of a resumption of in-school learning. Please, at least have the schools open by the fall. I'm a huge public school believer. I want the public schools from kindergarten through medical school. It is in my blood. But if there is not in-school learning for my son on the file, I'll have to send him someplace else. Thank you for your work and your consideration, Matt Pierce. Let's see. Next comment is Steve Brown. I am writing to request that ETHS take immediate steps to reopen for in-person learning and share its planning process and the goals of the community. I have had 2 graduates from ETHS. One is a current junior. No matter how much you try to spin it, remote schooling is inferior to in-person learning. You have received letters from doctors and organizations that doctors are a part of them, and you have refused to have a discussion with them. Everyone is confused. ETHS's inaction will have long-term negative effects on the community, a community of which I've been a proud member for over 20 years. I believe that District 202 administration and board should, 1, take deliberate, transparent steps towards reopening this school year, prioritize students who are most at risk in remote learning while providing options to continue remotely for those who do not wish to attend in person. 2, share information, including publicly answering live questions from community members. And 3, convene a broad-based advisory panel that includes local physicians. You have people who disagree with you about the speed of opening schools. Make it productive. D202 has support science decision-making and particularly values the expertise of doctors. They must do that in public health professionals who are diverse backgrounds and are up to date with the science of COVID, as well as aspects of children and adolescents, physical and mental health. CDC, AMA, American Academy of Pediatrics all came out recently in favor of schools reopening. It's confusing as to why you're not taking a science-based progressive approach. Lastly, on a personal level, I'm disheartened that the board and Dr. Witherspoon, as evidenced by my email and watching board meetings, is celebrating how good a job they are doing with their children are struggling and not being in person for learning. Thank you, Steve Brown. The next public comment is from Abby Torelli. I am an alum of ETHS. Our daughter is a senior in the first 2.75 years were very good. While we do offer support and follow the science is suggesting a return to school. Remote learning is better than no learning, but absolutely no substitute for in-person. As a board, you are completely failing all those students by not putting their needs ahead of everything. And the lack of transparency is really concerning. Every other district is moving toward or already in person. As an Evanstonian, I will have a hard time recommending the school. I've been impressed with many teachers, Dr. Campbell, and many other things, but this is just not okay. In frustration, Abby Turrell. The next public comment is from Kara Rudolph. I am writing to you as a concerned parent of 2 children at ETHS, as well as other parents whom I am in contact. Well, this plan for reopening and what can parents do to help the school open their doors? I'd like to know if there's anything I can do to help get my child back into the classroom. I can assist in communications or any other avenue. Please let me know. Parents need more information from the administration, school board, and teachers about what is happening with the reopening of school. It is my job as a parent to do the best I can for my children. I do not want my family to feel forgotten or dismissed without knowing the plan from District 202. Thank you, Kara Rudolph. Next we have Reverend Dr. Michael Nabors. I'm taking the liberty to write in support of regarding how you are handling the pandemic as it relates to Evanston Township High School. As a parent of a 16-year-old junior, I am aware firsthand of the maturation process of students during the academic year. In addition, as a senior pastor of a local church, I have been attuned to many parents and students attending ETHS. Finally, as president of the Evanston North Shore branch of the NAACP, I have also been very aware of Black and Brown students throughout Evanston Skokie communities. National data has clearly suggested that Black and Brown people have a higher susceptibility rate of given COVID-19 of expressing a pre-existing condition. In fact, most studies suggest that people of color are nearly 3 times more likely to get coronavirus and nearly 3 times more likely to die. A significant proportion of students at ETHS are Black and Brown. In addition, a significant amount, nearly half of ETHS staff is also Black and Brown. The sheer volume indicates that any COVID-19 outbreak would have a potential deleterious effect on Black and Latinx population. It's very clear that you both have done your homework. Well, especially painful to see our children out of school. We also prove wise in the months and years to come. My son Pierce recently made the honor roll and has been acclimated with e-learning. Well, it is not his first choice. He is also not ready to return to school until it's safe to do so. I feel comfortable speaking on behalf of nearly 900 members of Second Baptist Church and the 425 members of Evanston North Shore branch of the NAACP. While the sacrifices of families has been substantial, please stay the course until the science and the medicine offers a full go-ahead for establishing e-learning, even in a hybrid model. Very warmly, Reverend Dr. Michael C.R. Nabors, pastor Second Baptist Church, president Evanston North Shore NAACP. Next comment is from Katie Ojala. First off, thank you for working to open District 65 schools. I am very grateful to have the school open for after 11 months of closure. My current 5th grader at Willard is so grateful to return to school this week. I appreciate our teachers returning to the classroom, and I hope we can build on that success. That being said, I have been vocal with their 65 decision makers that our middle school plan is inadequate and inequitable. So many students, including my current 8th grader at Haven, had no hope of returning to in-person learning. This week, we bought a cap and gown for 8th grade graduation for a school. He will have attended half of the 3 years. How is this a step in the right with the district with the motto of every day, every child, whatever it takes? I hope District 65 can work to create a solution that accommodates all children who want in-person learning. Let's take the success of the school openings and build on them to help the students in our community. Thank you for all the hard work on behalf of the children and taking care of time to hear me and the district and other district families. Sincerely, Katie Ojala. Next up is Jennifer Fisher. As much as I was this for social communication, I do miss ETH dearly. I'm compelled to write as a community member. I have seen Evanston Township High School go through many changes and challenges, and I have also been proud that the decisions made were both good for the school and the community. These feelings have also been underscored by the administration's commitment to the health and safety of the entire ETHS family during the pandemic. I believe that decisions to keep learning remote and build closed were based on the best science and information available. I am hoping that you will continue to base future actions on the same criteria. I understand that this is a terribly horrible time for students, parents, teachers, literally everyone. And no time in recent history has any of us had to lead, make decisions, or follow directions under such duress or with the unknowns that what will happen next literally looming in front of us. I still have faith in the courage of ETHS leadership has shown, focusing on the health, safety, and science, the guideposts for decision making. I am hoping that the leadership will continue to stay the course with remote learning for as long as they can take the best course of action. As a former teacher and department chair, I still want the best for ETHS. This is a strange time and an unknown outcome. Let's make it the safest and best for all the information we have. Thank you. Stay safe, stay well, Jennifer Fisher. Next public comment is by Annette Patko. I'm writing a request that ETHS take immediate steps to reopen in-person learning and share its planning process with the goals of the community. I'm a parent of a student at ETHS who's a sophomore and a business owner in town and a board member of the board of directors of the Evanston Chamber of Commerce. I have been part of this community for many years now, and I also am happy to be part of Evanston. The last months have not made me feel so happy about things that are going on. I'm very concerned that the young people in our community are not and their well-being. I am regarding numerous posts from parents stating that they are dealing with depression in young children and teens, depression that is coming from children and teens being so isolated during these times. I have seen that with my own son. E-learning is not for everyone, and my son is one of those students who is falling behind because of this. When he was returning to school in the fall, when we found out it was still going to online, he told me, "Mom, I die a little inside in these online classes." Statements like that from a teenager who is a positive, active young man is heartbreaking for me to hear. The CDC's operation strategy for K-12 schools emphasized, quote, "It's critical for schools to open as safely as possible, as soon as possible, and remain open to achieve the benefits of in-person learning and key support services." I share the CDC's view that equity must inform reopening decisions, and the board community engagement and transparency are critical in reopening processes. I believe that the cost of remaining completely closed to in-person learning outweighs the risk beginning to reopen. I am relieved that vaccines are increasingly available to ETHS staff. Administrators have provided no specific information on how they plan to pursue the growing number of staff or vaccinated. Administrators previously said they hoped for a form of in-person learning in the fourth quarter of the school year, and that is 3 weeks away. Time. Next, we're just going to keep moving. Again, you can see these in their entirety. They will be posted. Next up is Kristy Brown. As schools are closed in almost a full year of staying at home, I beg you to truly reconsider and allow students to return in the spring, not the fall. There are many in the medical community seriously concerned about the mental health of students. It is real. Every day, another slice of misery for my ETHS junior. The day starts with him and ends with negativity and sadness over the isolation from teachers and fellow students, the endless Zooms for blocked classes, the lack of learning interactions, and the new never-ending homework that I think is intended to replace the lackluster school experience. This week, the week with depression over the 7 to 8 hours of homework she had to complete on Monday and Friday. She is relieved to have survived another week. If we were beginning our high school journey, we would absolutely have pulled her out of ETHS and into a private school. But she's in her third year and she's her third and the youngest child. So we are here to survive this miserable existence and get to senior year. I am not sure why you are disregarding the medical community's concern about the mental health of students. And as 9 doctors stated in a recent letter, quote, "We believe the evidence supports returning to students to ETHS for in-person learning. Let's get going." Kristy Brown. Her next public comment is from Sandy Deschamps. I have a grandson who would greatly benefit from the school reopening as safely as possible with e-learning as a stopgap measure. It just isn't the same as in-person learning. With appropriate safeguards in place, i.e. mask wearing temps taken, ramped up ventilation, and social distancing enforced, I believe students, staff, and teachers can safely re-enter the building. Looking at screens 5 to 6 hours a day is taking a toll on students, and I hope you seriously reconsider your plans to open in the fall. Sincerely, Sandy DeShot. Next up is David Alaco. I am in support of opening all schools for all students who want to attend in-person remote schooling. Is not working academic, socially, and emotionally for my 3 children, and I am deeply concerned that the damage is becoming irreversible. Public and private schools across the state, the country, and the world have shown without question that in-person learning can be executed safely. It's time for Emerson to get with the program. Thanks, Dave Alaco. Next up is Eric Shahab. Physicians and practitioners throughout the community continue to sound the alarm regarding the mental health toll of remote learning. Last week, the Center for Disease Control issued the following statement: it is critical for schools to reopen as safely as soon as possible, remain open to achieve the benefits of in-person learning and key student services. The amount of instruction time lost throughout the pandemic is staggering. Every week, ETHS receives nearly 60 minutes less instruction with live teachers per subject. Over the course of 36 weeks of school, the amount is nearly 10 weeks lost. ETHS has been recognized as a leader in remote learning and appropriately so. You have to face reality. Remote learning is diminished learning. The lost time is never coming back. More concerning, however, is the hidden toll of remote learning and the contributions to an evolving mental health crisis, which lose many of us due to the unfortunate stigmatization of mental illness that remains in our achievement culture. Most children and their families choose to suffer in silence due to embarrassment, judgment, and perceived failure. And if our children are depressed or suicidal, did we do something wrong as a parent to make them feel this way? If a child is exposed as having mental health challenges, are they ostracized or ridiculed by their peers? Why is there a groundswell of physicians and mental health providers concerns with the declining mental health status of our children, yet very few family anecdotes come forth with these stories? Just as health disparities have been exposed by the pandemic, so the stigma of mental health. But the data is clear. Adolescents are suffering. Compared to the same time period a year ago, the CDC reports a 31% increase in emergency room visits for acute mental health treatment from January 1st to October 17, 2020 for children aged 12 to 17. Our local community hospitals has no room to accept any more adolescent parents or for mental health patients for mental health services due to lack of further capacity. There is more to that comment. Again, you can see that on the website. It was also signed by several physicians: Eric Shahab, Shana Christensen, Virginia DePaul, Kathy DiVincenzo, Mary Hall, Valerie Kimball, Terry Marinas, James Olson, Matthew Pellerite, and Melanie Thomas. Next up is public comment from David Scrim. I currently have a junior HHS and two incoming freshmen. I'm concerned with the health consequences of isolation they have felt over the past year, which got worse with every passing week. Our restaurants are open for in-person dining. Our sports teams are playing cross-city competitive games. Our entertainment establishments like Altitude and Jump Zone are open for business. Parents are being called back to physically work in their offices. Yet most important part of our kids' life, school, has not communicated a plan to resume in-person learning. This is made more frustrating as the communications with our families from schools that have returned with no issues, in addition to health issues for our kids, are falling behind their counterparts who will be competing with ETHS students for coveted college placements. With others moving forward, we fall behind. You were trusted with the care and growth of our children. You are failing them. I write to request that ETHS take immediate steps to reopen for in-person learning and share its planning process and goals with the community. Dave Scrim. Next up is Nina Alaco. I am writing in support of opening schools for all students who want to attend in-person. Remote learning is not working academically, socially, and emotionally for my 3 children. I'm deeply concerned that the damage is becoming irreversible. Public and private schools across the state, the country, and the world have shown without question that the schools that they can reopen in person safely and be executed safely. It's time for Emerson to get with the program. Thank you, Nina Alaco. Next up is Christineluffquist. I would like to thank you on the behalf of our community to say this has been a difficult year. As an understatement, I wanted you to know that I trust you all using the data available to make decisions regarding schools, regarding reopening the high school this year. I fully support any decisions you make and do not force you to open your schools until we have administrative, teacher, and student buy-in. I realize that schools nearby have opened in a hybrid model. However, their demographics are totally different from ours, and I truly do not know how much learning is going on within the hybrid model. I definitely feel schools should reopen in the fall in a hybrid at a minimum, but only if teachers and some at-risk students are able to be vaccinated. And there needs to be a robust testing on a regular basis. Again, this also depends on the community statistics I'm hoping continue to improve. I'm also in support of in-person experiences you are offering on the asynchronous days and after class. I was also hoping that seniors can return to person when the weather is better. So some kind of hybrid graduation recognition ceremony. Ceremonies can be held that will allow students to see one another in person, even if there have to be 4 or 5 of them. I'm not pushing to get the high school reopened immediately, and I love the gradual approach, kind of testing the waters in terms of COVID-19 transmission. Finally, I do not want the district to have to spend millions of dollars to satisfy a small group of privileged opportunity hoarding parents who are worried about their students getting into elite colleges. Some say they have spent $1,000 on tutors, which is a sad testimony to their opinion about our fantastic school district. I assume they realize that other school districts throughout the United States are in the same situation, so their children are not losing out. Some of the parents are looking at the new Trier has done. This has also been a great resource. Some of the parents are looking at OPRF that recently opened at hybrid base. However, to my understanding, they still need to hire temporary classroom monitors. And the rest of Christineluffquist's comment will be available on the website. Next up is Deborah Turkelheimer. I'm a parent of ETHS sophomore. While I much appreciate that any of the challenges presented in the pandemic, a lack of transparency around the school reopening decisions has left me with several questions that I hope the administration can answer. The CDC operational strategy for K-12 through phase mitigation includes two-tiered plans for reopening. One of schools implement screening testing and other for schools that do not implement screening testing. Each of the recommendations addresses in particular the reopening of high schools with proper mitigation, suggesting a set of procedures for partial or remote instruction that depends level of community transmission. In other words, a very specific metric. Will the CDC recommendation apply to ETHS district? If not, why not? More broadly, will the district adapt a medical advisory board to ensure that it is implementing the best available science? It ways and implement reopening procedures. 3, although the CDC has emphasized that it is not considered vaccination a prerequisite for safety opening schools in communities with low community spread, such as ours, it is also recognized that vaccinated teachers and school staff can be considered one layer of mitigation and protection for staff and students, adding, quote, strategies that minimize barriers to access vaccination for teachers and frontline essential workers, such as vaccine clinics at a close to the place of work, are optimal. On the subject of ventilation, 1, what is the district vaccination? What is the district made to minimize barriers to access of vaccinations and teachers and staff? 2, one teacher and staff have been given the opportunity to be vaccinated, and the recommendation time for building immunity has passed. Will ETHS promptly reopen with recommendation mitigations in place regardless of whether the individual choose to vaccinate themselves? Once teachers and staff have been given the opportunity to be vaccinated, uptime, and the remainder of that comment is also available will be available on our website. Next up is Edward Zwerner. I'm writing a letter to express my support for the administration, faculty, and staff at ETHS as you move forward with your reopening plans to support students. As a parent of a current ETHS student, educator in a neighboring district, I know how complex, difficult, and emotional these issues are. And trying to open a high school building, also the no building's physical environment and social dynamic are exactly the same as watched from the sidelines from my children's education. I want to thank the educators who have worked long hours to make remote learning successful as it could be. You have made a dramatic shift in just 1 year, and rather than bombarded by national and local critiques of your performance, you deserve praise for the constant pivoting you have undertaken, the care you have given provided our students. I'm writing to ask my neighbors represented by the Reopen Evanston group and the separate MD group who have penned letters to the Evanston Roundtable to change your rhetoric and advocacy to be part of a solution for our schools. Currently, your opinions and advocacy instead strike me as a group pushing their white privilege on the district in a historically tone-deaf fashion. In particular, to the MD group, push yourself as experts, as to say we trust you, an all-white privileged group, as you make demands in this kind of an enactment of privilege that we in Evanston should be especially sensitive and mindful of. To the wider Reopening Evanston Schools Group, your publicly facing positions with reasonable are also put forward the problems of others. What you suggest in your guest essay that we can prioritize teens for a student in at-risk household after defending those households in your paragraph as particularly Black and Latinx, you other the concerns that as disease poses and misses what will be your responsibility. You'll be called upon to restrict travel, not to let your juniors get in the car over the weekend with 4 other students, especially with to be tested, not just the at-risk, everyone. And again, Ed Zwerner's, his remainder of his comment is available on the website. Next up is Michael Allen and Julie Allen. We write as parents of ETHS seniors, District 65 7th grader, to voice our dismay about the continued closure of Evanston Public Schools and urge a return to in-person instruction at ETHS and increase the number of students permitted to attend in-person instruction at Evanston's middle schools. We know that this has been a difficult year, full of challenges beyond the control of Evanston school leadership and SHARP. I share your commitment to the health and safety of students, teachers, and staff. That said, Evanston children have now been in full remote learning for an entire year, and the open-ended program or remote learning has taken a terrible toll on the education and social emotional well-being. We believe such costs will be weighed and balanced against manageable health risks associated with COVID. Recent studies, scientific based on 100,000 students and staff, District North Carolina has shown that transmission within schools is much lower than the surrounding community and found 0 cases of COVID transmission from a student to an adult. In the context, in both cases were results with no capital improvement to school buildings, and in the Wisconsin case, only 3-foot social distancing, given the Evanston 7-day positivity rate is under just 1% for nearly a month. Such such findings suggest an acceptable risk for more aggressive reopening plans than one adopted by District 65, and certainly a more aggressive approach than one at ETHS, which remains fully remote. We must remember that the original logic behind school closure was to prevent rapid spread that would overwhelm community hospitals and staff, a threshold MSM met long ago. From our perspective, there have been a decided lack of urgency and creativity from the district leaders concerning how to safely resume in-person instruction at ETHS and extend in-person opportunities in District 65. Dr. Weir's position, as far as we can tell, is essentially that until ETHS can open safely, can open precisely as it will be before COVID, it will not reopen at all. And the remainder of that comment is also available, will be available on our website. Next up is Whitney Reagan. My name is Whitney Reagan, and I'm a math teacher at ETHS. I support the school's decision to continue enhanced e-learning. Do not think we should move to hybrid. Hybrid models do not show benefits in learning and will result in worse qualities of education for both students in person and online. Teachers cannot effectively simultaneously teach both online and in person without someone getting a worse version of their education. Although teaching online is already a challenge, combining that with a handful of students in person will not benefit those in-person students. Furthermore, I believe that the concerns over the students' mental health are better addressed with activities provided than in-person experiences. By the in-person experiences, the regular school experience students are missing is not what they will get in the hybrid school model. We will not have the same personal connections during class as usual. Further, staying remote prevents COVID spread via school. Many teachers and staff have underlying conditions which put them at risk of greater effects of the virus. In addition, our students as young adults who are still at risk. As those become more information of the strain that impact children more intensely, they also put our youngsters students at risk. I myself, I miss my normal relationships with my students and how they used to be, but if moving to hybrid could result in even one possible death, that move is not worth it. Even in the move to the hybrid, there is no guarantee how long hybrid would last. If there were an outbreak at ETHS, that will be back to enhanced e-learning model. The idea of going back and forth is disruptive of students' learning. Look at the back and forth happening in our neighboring districts. Consistency is comfortable in such a tumultuous time. Having some consistency will make a big difference in the lives of students, staff, and teachers. And the remainder of Whitney Reagan's comment is available on the website. Paul Heathcote has a comment. It's one sentence long. I would like to know the metrics used to reopen. Sip of water, please. Next up is James Olson. I'm a local pediatrician who is seeing grave academic, social, and emotional damage that ETHS students in my practice are enduring, and is getting worse with each passing week of school closure. I'm writing to request that ETHS take immediate steps to reopen for in-person learning and share its planning process and goals with the community. The CDC's operational strategy emphasizes it is critical for schools to open for safety as soon as possible and remain open to achieve the best in-person learning and key supportive services. I share the CDC's view and equally must inform in-person learning and key supportive services. I share their view. However, fear in the face of reassuring science is not supporting equity. In fact, it is the opposite. Leaders must stand up and reassure fearful communities with science will guide operational plans, and the students can attend school safely. As it requires identifying leaders that hold the respect of the community to provide the reassurance, then so be it. But it must be done with the benefit of students before it's too late. Nearby, a very similar situation, similar community, Oak Park River Forest, has found its way to develop and implement an in-school plan. I do not understand how Evanston has not been able to do a similar advance toward in-person learning. Reopen Evanston schools with a local group to increase many physicians and other healthcare providers with expertise in areas of infectious disease, public health, mental health. They stand by to help ETHS tailor CDC's recommendation to need our community. We call on administration to convene a broad-based advisory panel to share information about its plan to reopen our community via available presentations, public answers, questions with community members, and take deliberate, transparent steps toward reopen, prioritizing students who are the most at risk during remote learning while providing the option of remote learning to those who do not wish to return. James Olson. Next up is Rick Cardis. Good evening. My name is Rick Cardis, and I've been a teacher for 25 years, including 13 at ETHS. I'm writing to express my gratitude to the board administration for staying on remote this school year. The decision prioritizes the health of the ETHS community by significantly reducing the possible community spread of the virus. Additionally, choosing remote learning is sensible educational choice. Teaching and learning in the hybrid is the worst option we have. As the administration repeatedly explained, having students in the school but socially distanced is not anywhere near what we normally experience. The added stress and complications for teachers will reduce effective learning. This simply is not nearly enough benefit to students seeing their teachers once every 2 weeks. It's an extremely restrictive setting to justify the health risks of the families, their teachers, other school staff, and the larger community. Thank you for consideration. I hope to stay the course and continue to make the best of a very bad situation. Rick Cardis. Next up is Oliver Ruff. I would like to commend and support ETHS administration and school board for its e-learning strategies while educating students during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's the most difficult decision for everyone due to the myriad of factors that plague students and their education. I know other school districts are taking a different approach to ETHS. However, I believe that they may be a viable approach for one community, may not be the best and most relevant for another. One of the reasons I feel this way is the in-person approach is not the most optimal education experience for ETHS because of the high percentage of Black and brown students, faculty, and the administration we serve. According to the latest test data available, COVID-19 Black and brown people are 1.4 to 1.7 times more likely to contract COVID-19. And once they get infected, they're 2.8 more times likely to die. It sounds negligible, but it's a major concern for those who are affected. Most proponents of in-person schooling, including the CDC, base their confidence in the school making structural changes to the school itself and compliance and safety among the students to wear a mask, practice social distancing, and frequently wash their hands. Compliance is a weakness in the argument. Since so many of us are social beings, ask yourself on the following compliance CDC safety standard guidelines adults in society at the CDC's safety standards are current. For those with a short memory, consider the Super Bowl, where most of what we witnessed interactions without regards to CDC standards. How many people were actually wearing masks and practicing social distancing? If adults are unwilling to comply with CDC safety standards, what compliance can you expect from a high schooler? I realize the educational institution and classroom are more preferable than virtual learning. However, my concern is what is most costly, the potential of losing lives, catching up in a less educational conducive environment. We realize that education is our number one priority, but trying to prevent a loss of life that is a deadly pandemic is being cautious is parallel to that issue. And the remainder of Oliver Ruff's comment is available on the website. Next up is Jessica and Alan Littman. We write as concerned parents of juniors at ETHS, a 7th grader at Haven and a 3rd grader at Lincolnwood to urge reopening of learning at ETHS. We acknowledge the enormous difficulties that last year brought with our Evanston community and beyond. Like you, we are committed to the health and well-being of our staff, teachers, and students. At this point, nearly a year into remote learning, we feel that any reasonable risk-benefit analysis suggests that an imminent return to in-person learning is essential to the well-being of high school students. Our daughter, continued isolation is leading to depression and apathy, in our opinion. In-person experiences, while a step in the right direction, do not sufficiently mitigate these serious problems. With science and all available data pointing to the possibility of safe return, we urge you to look for many districts around us that have a successful return to school in a form, including our very own District 65, where young teacher daughter thrilled beyond measure to return to school past week, despite the altered schedule and many changes to return. Further, we request more information, data about District 202's continue to offer in-person instruction. For example, does District 202 have a medical advisory board? That was similar to what was convened in District 65. We're unclear as to whether or not District 202 leaders will consider it safe for students to resume in-person learning. We are concerned that the decision about a return to school are not being made based on data. We urge you to honor your commitment to educating our children and reopen schools. Jessica and Alan Littman. Next is Susan Walmsley. Hi, I understand that a joint board meeting of District 202 tomorrow. My 5-year-old attends Dewey Elementary. We returned in person last week for afternoon session. While I'm very happy that she's finally in school, is entirely too short. Generally, e-learning with lunchtime drop-offs is impacting my husband and I's ability to work with my daughters. Desperately wants and needs full-time school. My young daughter has been back in full preschool in person since July 2020. My oldest, who is in full person preschool pre-pandemic, so she's used to being in a structured environment surrounded by other children. We have struggled with behavior issues and regression of nighttime toilet training while she is at home after school. After speaking with doctors, we believe she is looking for attention and simply missing routine. My main concern is that my daughter is struggling with her reading and I am not best equipped to help her. Over the last 6 months, we have a couple of babysitters help a few hours. Some days I take my daughter to work with me. Some days in home with my husband and I. With all the calls. A few weeks ago, we managed to get into an afternoon camp with the Park District. This week, my daughter attended camp, and she's been happiest. On the day she is home with my husband and I, she sometimes ends up spending half the day alone playing or watching TV. I'm not proud of it, but we don't have any options. Dewey has gone above and beyond with the COVID procedures and reopening. It's my understanding that the teachers are being vaccinated. I'm happy that the school staff are protecting against COVID soon. I'm also looking to understand how in-person learning is expanded for more students to extend hours that are vaccinated. I would like to see a full plan laid out, get the kids back to in-person full-time in the fall. Recent comments from the CDC and Anthony Fauci have claim that schools can reopen and get the kids back to school. Remainder of her comment is available on the website. Next up is Dima Hamilton. I'm writing to encourage you to resist the pressure to reopen ETHS to hybrid learning as both a faculty community member. My urging of this is multifaceted. One of my primary concerns will be reopening hybrid learning as relative to the new COVID-19 UK variant known as B117. This variant is said to be 50 to 70% more contagious, 30% more deadly, and has been shown to do greater harm to young people than initial COVID-19. The B117 variant poses those new properties because of 13 genetic mutations, many of which are the spike proteins. These mutations are changing the structure of the S protein, enhancing it to bind in the human ACE2 receptors. Existing COVID-19 vaccinations are designed to target the original structure of the S protein, so it may not be effective against the new strain. Not only has some of our staff not been vaccinated yet, but our students have not been vaccinated either. This new variant coronavirus is growing exponentially. CDC expects that B117 variant to be a dominant variant in the United States by March 26, leading to possibly the fourth wave of American coronavirus infection. Many countries, including the UK, are preparing for a very aggressive lockdown as anticipated that the spring. The United States will be following suit. After we've done with the safest for the students and the staff in the community, now is not the time to relax our approach by prematurely transitioning to hybrid learning. We don't just risk safety of thousands of people, we are possibly risking in-person instruction in the fall as well. Aside from my concerns of B117 variant, hybrid instruction also proved to be instructionally, has not proven to be instructionally better. Not only will our attention as educators be divided between in-person remote students, but our on-site students will still be learning with a computer. The only difference is that they will be wearing masks and socially distanced. And that's the time on that one. And if you want to read the rest of Dima Sabara's comment, it was available. It will be available on our website. Next, we have Dr. Greta Maker Clark. I write to you as an Amazon-based physician in North Shore Medical Group, global public health experience, educator, CPS school, and a mother of 2 children at ETHS. Patiently, I've waited even when emails and messages have not been answered for some transparency in the ETHS pandemic management process. While the eTown Live videos are uplifting and helpful to hear, them make us feel somewhat connected to the school during the school year, they've been sorely lacking in pertinent information. I will get to the point. When is the communication about the plan for the reopening? What is the plan? Where is the plan? Where's the board meeting to communicate a plan in the community and asking ETHS leadership to do the same? At this point, I have to assume that there is no plan. The ETHS Medical Clinic is run by a public health trained, adolescent medicine trained pediatrician in North Shore mega system is a stone's throw away. So it's unclear as to why there are no direct medical professionals transparently guiding the board to help make the need a decision to show how to handle the pandemic this time. My question is metrics. What are being used to determine ETHS will reopen? If positivity rates are what is being focused on, what rates will be used? State, local, national? Why are we not on a dashboard as with OPRF, Nutrier? We should look to them. Vaccines. How is ETHS coordinating with local regional hospitals to help get teachers vaccinated? Teacher vaccination is not required for safe schooling. However, with a high BIPOC staff percentages, how are we strategically helping our teachers who want to get vaccinated? This is possible. Skokie Health Department is doing it. Medical board, is there one? If yes, who's on it? Reopening metrics. What is the protection plan for 2020-21? Most of the data research shows that you should prioritize, and the rest of that comment is available, will be available on our website. Next up is Prabha Paramasaran. All right, I request ETH take immediate steps to reopen for in-school learning and share its planning process and goals with the community. A taxpayer here in Evanston, coming at this from the matter of true concern to flight of Evanston due to the only public high school in town, ETHS not being open for in-person learning while other public schools have committed some form of in-person learning. A large reason people move to Evanston is for the outstanding public schools, District 65 and ETHS District 202 continue to not even put forth a plan for in-person classroom learning, whether the remainder of the 2021 school year or the 21-22 school year jeopardize reputation. District 202 leaves families who continued uncertainty and therefore needing to make other plans for their children, prompting some families to start to leave Evanston. The CDC's emphasizes it is crucial for schools to reopen safely as soon as possible and remain open to achieve the goal of in-person learning as key support services. I share CDC's view that equity must inform reopening decisions and the community engagement transparency is critical to the reopening process. I believe that the cost of remaining completely closed in in-person learning and outweighs the risk of being in reopen. I am aware that vaccines are in short supply presently in Evanston for the 1B group. However, administrators need to plan for and provide specific information about how they plan to proceed in getting all District 65 and 202 teachers and staff who are willing vaccinated. ETH administrators clearly said they hope for some form of in-person education in the fourth quarter of the 2021 school year, and that is 3 weeks away. Yet, ETHS has not updated community on how they will reopen for in-person learning and how it will make decisions about reopening. By remaining largely silent about its plans of reopening in person, ETHS is harming the community. Many students are suffering from isolation, and that's time for that. The remainder of that comment will be available on our website. Next up is Mike Harris. Since March 2020, I supported the decision to responding to COVID-19, the quick response to remote learning last spring, and the decision to maintain a remote platform for the fall semester. However, I believe the wisest and most cautious approach. As an educator, I'm an adjunct at Columbia College and parent to ETH students. I felt the conservative course you chartered was the best for all involved in the additional community. I taught a hybrid class last fall. We only met 3 times during the semester because the state and Columbia College wisely shut things down in November. During the 1-year mark, the frustrating pandemic, with many months of scientific and practical experience, I feel strongly, as do many of students, parents, teachers, that ETHS needs to implement a safe plan for getting its students and teachers back into the classroom during the spring semester. There's overwhelming evidence and hundreds of models nationwide of how to return students and teachers to classrooms in a safe and cautious environment. We know that 2 most recent national spikes in COVID cases were not connected to schools that held in-class meetings during the fall again or in the winter. We also know that schools across the country have employed creative and practical systems for returning students to class in a myriad of hybrid forms. And again, there's been no measurable, verifiable spike in COVID cases reported in those openings. The hybrid approach that is used in many schools across the country, and starting here in District 5 schools, had proved to be effective and manageable and safe for all members of the school community. This seems a logical approach for ETHS. In-class attendance 2 or 3 days a week based on the same remote schedule students are currently working. In-class numbers could be split between classes weekly in order to keep classroom occupants lower than a normal classroom meeting. Or ETHS could alter grades attend on specific days. The remainder of the comment, Mike Harris's comment, will be available on our website. Next up is Valerie Bailey. I write to request that ETHS take immediate steps to reopen for in-person learning and share this planning process with the goals of the community. We have a 16-year-old junior at ETHS who's been sitting in front of a computer in his bedroom for almost an entire year now. A year ago, our child, loved going to school, was looking forward to a great junior year at ETHS, and was excited about getting ready for college. How things have changed in 1 year. Our child, who was once driven, highly motivated student, has lost his drive and ability to focus and is clearly depressed. The CDC operational strategy emphasizes it's critical for schools to open as safely as soon as possible and remain open to achieve the benefits of in-person learning and services. I share the CDC's view that equity must inform reopening decisions and that the broad community engagement and transparency is critical reopening process. I believe the cost of remaining remote, completely in-person learning outweighs the risk of beginning to reopen. I am relieved that vaccines are increasingly available to ETHS. Still, administrators have provided no specific information about how they plan to proceed in growing numbers of staff are vaccinated. Administrative previously said they hope for formal in-person instruction in the 4th quarter of the school year, and we're now just weeks away. Yet ETHS has now updated a community on how we are and what our plans are to reopen for in-person learning, how it will make decisions about reopening. By remaining largely silent about its plans for reopening for in-person learning, ETHS is harming the community. Many students are suffering from isolation, deteriorating mental health. Adults are confused and stressed out, and women bearing the brunt of the pandemic caused emotional and financial crisis that is exacerbated by the closure of school for almost a year. Reopen Evanston School is a local group, and that's time, and the rest of Valerie Bailey's comment will be available on the website. Next up is David V Thorson. On behalf, it's an open letter to the ETHS leadership calling for greater transparency. On behalf of 27 ETHS parents, please find an open letter, and here it is. Hold on, start over. We represent a group of concerned ETHS parents, several of us who happen to be licensed mental health professionals and experts working for children, adolescents, and young adults. You have heard from many of us over the last few months about, through multiple communication channels, try to engage in sensible, constructive dialogue with you regarding our growing concerns at the current and future negative consequences of remote learning on ETHS students' mental health and well-being across cognitive, emotional, physical, and social domains. We will not spend too much time here elaborating on the growing rates of depression, suicide, anxiety, isolation, substance abuse, or sleep disorders that have been associated with remote learning among adolescents, or the compounded negative effects of social comparison with nearby similar schools that have reopened in different ways. You have acknowledged your awareness and concerns of this, and for that, we are grateful. We know you are also aware of the possibility of post-COVID stress after effects, such as social withdrawal, avoidance of agoraphobic-like behaviors, heightened stress reactivity, social anxiety, related maladaptive coping strategies. Alternatively, for some, you are also likely aware of the surge in fear of having missed out, risk of taking behaviors and attitudes to try to catch up, making things right after feeling they have sacrificed and given so much. We know you are aware of the secondary risks and reverberations, and that each child is not in the classroom has become exacerbated. We cannot speak to the tone of all the emails and phone calls you received over the last several months, but we understand in your shoes in our communication with you. We have tried to understand the monumental tasks and decisions that you must face on a daily basis. We have tried to model our communications to you with concern, understanding, collegiality, respect, and sensitivity, because we are all members of the same ETHS team. And that is a minute and a half for that comment, and a comment in its entirety will be available on our website. Next up is Julie Mattia. I'm writing to express my dismay that there is no outline with regard to concrete reopening process of ETHS. I watched the recent E-Town Lab and understood all the concerns raised in it. I also know, as a parent and a licensed mental health provider in Evanston, that our teens, including mine, are suffering from isolation, anxiety, and suicidal thinking. I know I've never taken many local teens contact me for counseling. My own ETHS sophomore has to add medications, psychiatric visits, and other specialty visits to help her therapy visits. Her previously managed anxiety has taken over her daily life. She despises remote learning. She now feels uncomfortable in her own room, where she has been sitting daily for classes. She forgets the material from one class day to the next due to her block schedule. At my encouragement, she has lowered her academic standards just to get through the day. Furthermore, I'm unable to take on new teen clients due to the time it takes for my schedule to manage all the new needs for my own child. The in-person experiences seem like a good idea, but it's too difficult to understand that the student who is deeply anxious and depression will have difficulty finding energy to go to an activity on their own, not knowing what to expect. In addition, the option to attend remote learning at the school is fantastic for the kids who need a safe space, while others feel they have the safety they need at home, maybe reluctant to take advantage of the option. They might feel it's not for me. I also have a choice for sports. I also know that choice for sports return was not made at the local level, but it's unfathomable to me why this is most happening to successful kids who do not participate in sports are feeling left out and isolated. My teen checks for news each day for a 30-day return plan as promised by Dr. Witherspoon. Her and the remainder of that comment will be available on the website. Next up is Steve Ewald. I am writing you as a longtime Evanston resident, higher ed employee, most important close friend and partner of multiple public educators. I know they aren't uncommon or particularly meaningful credentials, but imagine you are welcome to additional perspectives. First, let me say how proud I am to live in a city that supports high school mission to be inclusive, equitable, and progressive. I never thought I would be bragging about local high school efforts to others, but over the last several years, I've found myself repeatedly impressed. I hope you'll consider following comments regarding potentially reopening beyond the limited voluntary supplemental in-person experiences. In short, given the limited amount of time for the school year, I do believe the potential reward outweighs the risk involved. Teachers have spent months perfecting their routines, setting expectations, learning how to effectively use online tools, and discovering how to appropriate their attention properly to students that deserve it. To upend these efforts now with new challenges would be very disruptive. Two, since remote learning will continue, the in-person experience would simply mean additional effort with no reduction in others. Teachers would either have to reduce the instructional remote learners or take time away from their personal time, which would further impact their mental health. The administration has previously said remote is preferable to hybrid from an instructional standpoint, and both students and teachers value consistency, instruction, and messaging. I know every teacher is dying inside because they can't interact with their students in person. There is so much pushback despite this should be telling. I'm curious what voices the support staff has. They're a crucial component. I worry that there is a vocal minority pushing an agenda that is not consistent with the school's value, the opinion of educators, epidemiologists, experts, and the expectations of the school administration. And the remainder of the comment is available online. Next up is Lee Clifford. It was a mix of emotions that I finally sent my kids back to District 65 in person last week. The joy and relief that they could finally be back in the classroom with their teachers was tinged with bewilderment that it took so long, distress that they could only be there for a few hours, and a sense of sadness that so many Evanston kids that want to be in class are still stuck learning remotely with no clear path to a return. This is a crisis, and we need as our leaders to understand the real urgency the parents are feeling. Comments that e-learning is just as good as classroom learning, or that it's working because students are getting a similar number of A's that they did last year, have been met with absolute bafflement by the community. Every single parent I've spoken to in Evanston reports that e-learning does not provide even a shadow of what in-person school has given our kids. The parents of high schoolers report their kids are depressed, isolated, falling behind, and have lost their love of learning. It's a tragedy. Furthermore, the CDC and Dr. Fauci have been stated that one, school should reopen even if the area with the increased community spread, and B, vaccines are not a prerequisite for safe reopening. Dr. Witherspoon, we cannot only follow the science when it suits us. Do you believe that districts such as Oak Park River Forest do not care about the safety of their teachers? Of course they do, but they are employing mitigation methods to keep them safe, and while also weighing the great harm done to the students by keeping schools closed. The entire point of this spring Lockdown was not to eradicate the viruses, flatten the curve, so our hospitals will not be overwhelmed. Your comments are distressing because they give credence to the idea that school is unsafe and the vaccines will mean the end of the pandemic rather than what it views as the current science support. We are far past the point where Evanston's only public high school can remain closed. To that, I respectfully ask DTO to create a medical advisory team. Remainder of the comment will be available online. Next up is Andrew Siegel. My name is Andrew Siegel. I'm a teacher at ETHS and a parent of ETHS student. I write today in both roles at ETHS regarding remote learning. As a parent, I have seen the challenge remote learning has for students. As a parent, I wish that they could come back to school, the school that existed pre-COVID, the school that I hope they can attend during the 21-22 school year. Sadly, when I shift roles from parent to educator, I cannot give myself the answer I want to hear. Any return to school this year will follow ETHS's hybrid plan with all that it calls for in terms of distancing and reduced class size. I remember the video presentation that the administrator gave us in the summer when it introduced the hybrid plan, specifically the moment when Dr. Campbell said that we would be bringing students together to keep them apart. Being in school only 2 days every 2 weeks and being isolated from peers is not what I want for my child, nor is it what I want for my students. During remote teaching, I can present myself unmasked and focus on each student in my class. I can work with colleagues to develop lessons and follow up with students who need support. If we begin teaching under the hybrid plan, I can only not tailor my teaching for the students in my classroom because I would have to keep at least 3/4 of my students home on Zoom in the forefront of my mind. My teaching in a hybrid would be the same as remote, only with less class time and probably less effective. Finally, I commend our school for doing what is safest, even as undesirable. Continue doing remote schooling in the safest path for ETHS at large. We do so to the very end. If someone in the community were to tell me to stop taking antibiotics during the day 7 of a 10-day treatment because I felt better, I would reject that as an unsafe suggestion. I think the board should do the same if anyone in our community suggests remote learning before the end of the school year. Next up is a drink of water. We have Jill Bishop. As the parent of ETHS freshman who has been in the building for 5 times ever, I'm asking you to urgently open ETHS. I understand the concern to keep staff safe, but as we see the suburban high schools almost safely, I'm increasingly frustrated with ETHS has not done the same. And when students should have the opportunity to learn meaningful ways inside the building, freshmen, the majority of whom have no connection and context, urgently need the opportunity most of all. Promising vaccination news shows at least 75% efficiency within 2 weeks of the first dose, given increased vaccine supply, not to mention the ventilation, space, and cleaning procedures implemented in the building over the last year. ETH should quite reasonably open 30 days notice starting today and make plans to staff and staff the building accordingly. The academic, social, and most important mental health of our needs need immediate action. Thank you, Jill Bishop. Next up, Julie Ward. I'm in Evanston and put 4 of my children through districts found 2. Currently, my last child is a junior ETH. Our family has been positive experiences thus far with all teachers, staff, coaches, and administrators. However, beginning in August, the breakdown in communication with our community has left us as parents, students with unanswered questions. As someone who works in a long-term substitute teacher in person in the surrounding suburbs every day, I felt safe from procedures for spread of COVID-19. Additionally, I just received my vaccine 2 weeks ago. I have never missed one day of school as a teacher, student, parent, administrator, support staff, and countless other workers in my district have prioritized student learning, social, emotional well-being, and teacher safety. I'm with Reopen Evanston for 3 reasons. 1, asynchronous and remote learning for over a year should not be the norm. It has left ETHS children at a deficit. Moreover, they have missed out on classroom interactions which take place at high school in a safe and productive manner. 2, in mid-February, the CDC rolled out their blueprint for safety reopening schools. The agency crafted a plan based on research and data showing the risk of COVID-19 transmission in a school setting is extremely low and mitigation strategies are implemented strictly enforced. It is based school monitoring COVID-19 in the community and school consistent implementation mitigation strategies to reduce risk of COVID-19 transmission. 3, we can prioritize sports at ETHS. Why can't we vaccinate our teachers, open our schools, and address the issues of COVID-19 testing? Many other districts have approximately the same size as ETHS have opened in some capacity, hybrid model at the minimum. As Evanstonians, we know the village to solve anything. I'm willing to help in any way I can. We all have the same goals to see our students succeed academically, emotionally, gain independence, and move through the stages of life. Thank you for all you do for Evanston and make a better place for everyone. I urge you to please reopen Evanston this spring. Best, Julie Ward. Next up is Laura Lindroth. As a parent of current sophomore and as a professional mental health, I strongly urge ETHS to do everything possible to open at least hybrid model for the students next fall. Of course, I am just concerned as anyone about COVID and making support staff and students feel safe, but I would urge you to please consider a recommendation Dr. Fauci CDC and strongly consider percentage of vaccinated individuals we would need to have it in order to safely open without putting anyone at significant risk. There will be some risk, but the mental health of folks is more important. And as we at Rainbows are seeing a lot of students who are feeling negative effects of isolation and social connection, not to mention suffering academically, which is important when weighing those decisions. Suicidal ideation is increasing and many are losing hope. I've heard a lot of young people, including my own, wonder whether they will ever see the school again. Many doubt that they will ever return, and it concerns them at the point that they often feel helpless and discouraged. As I'm sure you are aware, young people are much more in the moment than adults. They have less of a capacity to imagine the future and consider long-term prognosis of things. Therefore, they are more inclined to think negatively and feel the way things are now is the way things will always be. I think they need to be given some sense of normalcy and hope that an increasing experiences they had or hoping to have at ETHS Wildcat will still be there. Well, ETHS has done a decent job and obviously put a lot of effort into remote learning. It is just not the same. I would like my children and all ETHS students to flourish, not flounder. I think they have worked too hard for too many years to prepare for the high school experience, not to be given the opportunity. The mental health toll of the virus has been discussed, and the remainder of the public comment will be available on our website. Next public comment is from Susan Wishnick. With the many recent discussions in the press and on essentially public school media groups regarding ETHS and its operation this school year during the pandemic, I feel compelled to write support of administration and teachers. Personally, I have no strong opinions on whether or not ETHS can or should reopen, other than this, what is the safety of students, teachers, and everyone in the building should remain the primary consideration during the pandemic. I trust our administrators with the support of the school board and the expertise of the community and the state as they choose to consult and helpful to their efforts to make those decisions. I commend ETHS administrators and teachers for the Herculean efforts of the school year, providing educational services to our students during these challenging times with information and circumstances can rapidly change from day to day. I applaud my senior students, teachers who have done an extraordinary job providing high quality education and engaging my students during e-learning. I'm grateful that we live in an era where we can have e-learning to compensate for the loss of opportunities to attend school in person. If THS is able to reschedule open their school building in Q4, I support the priority return of our most vulnerable students, those who are struggling educationally or emotionally or with e-learning, who need face-to-face teaching. I support the rights of teachers and staff to continue to work remotely if they feel returning to the school building at this time is not safe for them or their family members, or if they themselves have young children and e-learning require their supervision. Respectfully submitted, Susan Wishnick. Next up is Peter Slevin. It is disappointing to see how little information is being shared. District 202 Board ETHS Administration deliberation reopening in the spring and summer or fall of 2021. Lack of transparency around the decision-making process during the pandemic is creating confusion, dismay, skepticism, unfortunately vitriol that could be avoided. I would like to make a simple request. ETHS administrators hold a live weekly question and answer session beginning the first week of March. The session will be focused on the high school's planning and progress, its questions, its conclusions, and what is known and what is not yet knowable. Handled well, these sessions will provide invaluable information to the public, alert ETHS administrators, parents, students concerned, help the robust trust, and develop support for the goals we share. The information shared via this session can also be posted to the website and broadcast via social media. I do not believe this is asking too much. Governor Pritzker has held such briefings to great effect. Indeed, he answers questions in public on camera every day in the early weeks of the pandemic. So did, for example, Dr. Allison Urwadi, the director of Chicago's Public Health Department. District 65 has been increasingly open to showing its work and as other schools, districts, in the regions. Many thanks, Peter Slavin. Next up is David Zurega. Hello, I'm writing to address the changes in the middle school math curriculum that were presented in District 65 school board meeting on February 8th, especially the newest plan, the cancellation of Math 6-7 by and large and cancellation of Math Acceleration in general. I say by and large because the individual evaluation and unidentified accommodation will apparently continue to be exceptionalities. I see this as was an afterthought to the plan. However, there is no mention of what these exceptionalities would be or how these students would be identified, nurtured, accommodated within the framework. It was mentioned in the presentation that the individual assessment would be given to meet the requirements of the Accelerated Placement Act, but the process was not made clear. Obviously, District 5 did not codify the process to include codification publicly on the Math Acceleration information on the district's website. On the whole, I find District 5's drive to eliminate Math Acceleration to be confusing and disturbing. It seems self-evident that the goal of an educational institution would be an opportunity to support, not subtract it. Furthermore, I would have expected that the preferred path to equity or racial path to Math Acceleration and other high-level opportunities would be to tear down barriers, including racial bias, policy choices, and build more on-ramps to opportunity. Instead, if 1 in 3 white, Asian, and multiracial students are participating in Math Acceleration, shouldn't the goal be to have 1 in 3 Black, Latinx, and students participating too? If a 1 in 3 participation rate across races is better than the goal of 0 for 7,900 as a party of zero literally serves no one. We're talking thousands of current students that will be negatively impacted by this choice. Because of the intrinsic importance of building camp on-ramps to success is time. The remainder of that comment will be available on the website. Next up is Elena Amaker. I'm writing to let you know that I support your efforts to keep our community and school safe during COVID-19. This pandemic has affected all of us, as well as many of our students and families. You've kept us safe and our students educated. I applaud the ETHS School Board Administration for analyzing experiences of students and families in surrounding districts. Recently, CDC updated their guides and made it clear that revising their situation related to COVID-19 in high school is not the same as in elementary school. The threat of spreading disease is more likely. I have a freshman student who contracted COVID-19 in October, and she's been fighting many lasting effects ever since. She has on average 2 doctor appointments with a host of medical specialists, but they cannot help her get well. As somebody who not know the nature of the beast, my student missed a lot of 2 quarters, has not been able to attend classes even virtually. I would hate for this opportunity I would hate for this to happen to more of our students. Let's think long term. What will we do if many of our students ended up ill? What will the parents turn to educate their new physically ill student indefinitely? If we open to the hybrid model, we could possibly risk many lives, faculty, students, and families. How will we fix them? Just because things are lawful does not always make them expedient. Let's consider the entire community, not just specific families. I encourage ETHS administration to hold fast to our current educational model. Elena Amaker. Next, Roger Goldberg. As a North Star physician and surgeon who has been working throughout the past years with an additional health degree in epidemiology, I'm among many of those to the point dismayed by the watching our students experience an unnecessary degree of anguish. I wanted to ask a few questions. 1, sports. Athletic practices are permitted for some. Is there a reason that other safe activities such as geometry and construction science labs, art, or music are not already running? Can the administration now, without delay, open such activities, begin proceeding providing a new psychological to our student population? It's implausible to me that a physician, public health training, and parent that performs construction on and out their home would be unsafe. 2, as parents of 4 children across high school age spectrum, it seems clear that the current senior class has experienced an epic blow to their development. We have taught these kids to be passive, to sit in their rooms, and to wait for the next directive, which never comes. Many of us wonder why we can't harness that creativity of those incredible students. Why not organize small groups of discussion, literary classics, or debating history, spreading out in 1 or more specific gyms? Why not present a challenge to the students themselves? Have them prepare safe learning and social sessions and activities, or have them place part in planning a safe outdoor graduation. These hard times could be the best opportunities for the kids to be innovative. We landed a rover on Mars, and yet we have nothing for these impressionable kids. We're asking them to sit still and to have them trapped in none of their creativity or problem solving. From the community perspective, and certainly for me as a physician, it seems clear that with swift reopening and many activities that will lift spirits, even if resuming full capacity classroom learning, there are still ways to help impressionable kids learn the year relative upswing. That's Roger Goldberg. Next is Elizabeth Johnson. I'm ready to let you know that I support your efforts to keep the community in safe schools during COVID-19. The epidemic has affected all of us, but in this time you have kept us safe, our students educated. I applaud ETHS Board of Administration who've analyzed the expertise of students, families, surrounding areas. Throughout the pandemic, the district has been carefully followed the guidelines of CDC, IDPH, and the Department of Public Health. Recently, CDC updated guidelines, and clearly the revision situation relates to COVID-19 in high schools is not the same as elementary schools. I'm not part of the reopening group who claims the voice of the community. I'm ready to tell you that I support ETH administration, the courage they have shown to find a different path to keep students educated during the pandemic. Elizabeth Johnson, grandparent. Sorry, need a drink. Next is Alice Berry. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I've listened to discussion in our community about the schools closing and the hardship that have been placed on parents. I've seen the stress close up in my families and friends. I've seen economic hardships in the parents having to stay home to take care of their children. I've seen the emotional hardship in teachers who are showing up while fearing for their lives and welfare of their children if they should die. Before writing this comment, I went to look at the data. The Trump administration apparently discouraged data collecting in schools because the big numbers would look bad. According to research at Brown University, January 13th, more than 2 million people under the age of 18 had caught COVID, and almost 11% of the national caseload at the time was children. Think about that. 11% of COVID-19 demand on our healthcare system was for sick children. Many pediatricians believe that the true number of infected viruses is much higher than the illness, often mild in kids, and goes undetected. Now, as a reminder, no one knows for certain about the long-term damage done by the virus. The best guess seems to be that 200 to 300 children under 18 have died. Brown University says that schools from January 18th to 31st, 0.55% of students in person learning got COVID-19. Translated to the 3,615 students at ETHS, that would be an average of 18 students getting infected every 2 weeks. And if ETHS opened for in-person learning with no way of knowing how they'll get, or if they get it, they might die. Brown University also says that 2 teachers will be infected over the 2-week period. A remainder of 32.4% of ETHS teachers, about 86 teachers, are non-white and therefore have already have a high risk of infection. As of January 27th, AFT knew that 530 school employees would have died of the virus. It's very easy to get lost in the weeds on this topic because there is so much speculation, so many strong opinions, and frankly, so much racism and opportunity hoarding in these opinions. And with all of it, I continually coming back to the same conclusion. For economic hardships, these are the remedies. For emotional hardships, these are the remedies. But for death, there is no remedy. How we do? How we doing on time?
It is 8:18.
The rest of the comments will be posted on the website. There were about 6 more comments that I couldn't get to.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, for reading faster than anybody I've heard read. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to keep going here. Items for information. Here we are. Item number 6. We're starting with the joint literacy goal. We've got some historical data. There were some updates. There was some attachments in the agenda. So Dr. Witherspoon, you want to kick us off? You're muted.
On our end, I'm going to introduce Dr. Bavis again, but he's only going to make a little bit of an introduction so that he can get his voice back.
Yes.
And pass it on to our folks. And then Dr. Horton, is it Stacy on your end or?
Yes, it's Dr. Beardsley and Kylie.
Okay, so you want me to go ahead? Why don't I toss it to Pete and he and Dr. Beardsley work together a lot and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Witherspoon. The first item for us is just the historical analysis. This comes out of our last joint board meeting where the boards requested to look at the historical data using the same thresholds we did in the initial presentation using MAP and STAR data. Those results of that work are in your packet. We use the same reporting format that we used in the past, and this reporting format would be the same format going forward. Again, what we found was incredibly consistent with years past. Their trends are stable over the 3 years reported in grades 3 through 8. We do see some areas of notable progress, which we could, just basically that are in there. And by gender, we see that female students make the literacy goal at a higher rate than male students. There's also progress in goal attainment for those who qualify for free reduced lunch. And there are other patterns as well, but the headline is that it's very consistent and stable as a measure. And essentially that's what we would look for in a measure. But I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Beardsley for further analysis. We also have Kylie Klein and Dr. Carrie Levy here as well for this portion. And then once we just do those general observations, we'll move to the second item on here, which is the literacy partnership update, which where you'll hear from Scott Bramley, Dr. Scott Bramley, newly minted, along with Dr. Elizabeth Cardenas Lopez and Dr. Stacy Beardsley. But I'm going to turn it over to Stacy for the historical piece.
Yeah, no, I'd really echo a good bit of what Dr. Davis just mentioned. The outcomes currently are fairly stable. We did highlight a few essentially like promising areas within the memo. One area is looking specifically at some performance for our Black students and our Black 8th graders as we show an upward trend in that particular area. I'd also note that the pattern around reporting for this goal would be that we would bring data forward again next spring, and that would be for essentially the class that would be currently freshmen, the class of 2025. We're not bringing forth current data this year because COVID impacted our assessment schedule. So we're filling in the historical data that we promised to deliver. Both schools at this point are committed to giving their assessments D65 in the spring, 202 in the fall, which would allow us to bring back a current data set next spring. And I think at this point, it's really, we wanted to bring forward the historical data. And I think if there are particular questions, we can open up to those. Dr. Davis, is that correct? Or do we want to move into the second portion first?
Well, let me ask, because we did have the memo and the handouts. So I'll ask, are there any questions or discussion from any board members before we move forward?
I appreciate that we have this information, given how long of a journey it's been to be able to pull it together. I am curious well, in the memo, there wasn't a significant amount of analysis shared in terms of how we are interpreting this data and what the plan is to respond to that interpretation of the data. So I would like to hear more about what the response each team has to the trends in the data.
So Anya, a couple things that I would speak to. For the District 65 team, one, this is what we're presenting here is historical data to fill in comparison points from previous years. And so this was data that meant, we have not shared in this format, but we have analyzed and worked from over the past several years. The fact that we see that it is consistent then speaks to ultimately our goal here is about accelerating learning outcomes. And so that then moves us into the work that we're doing currently. And as a district, we really are working on attacking our literacy outcomes through essentially a tiered approach. Number one, we're taking a look at our curricular materials and ensuring that we have high quality standards aligned materials that our educators are having an opportunity to dig into through our professional learning communities and our PLCs. And it's in our PLCs then we're also paying attention to ongoing and regular assessment through our unit assessments, pre and post assessments, as well as our formative assessments, and using those PLCs to also focus in on our priority learning standards, which have been incredibly important this year with remote learning. We've taken the ISB priority learning standards and also compared those with ones from student achievement partners to really say, where do we need to pay the most attention to learning? Our educators have been digging in and understanding the demands of those standards in our PLCs, and then designing instruction to help our students achieve those standards as we look at formative and unit assessment. Additionally, a couple of things that we've shared through our Spotlight systems is our leaders have been visiting classrooms throughout the year to provide feedback to our educators to really support ongoing growth. And we've been using those Mondays to provide both planning, collaboration, and professional learning to support the work remotely as well as with these curricular materials. That really moves us from the tier 1 into tier 2 and tier 3. And as we talk a little bit later about summer lift, that is an example of a tier 3 intervention. We're also taking a good look at our interventions, tiers 2 and tier 3, and the process of a redesign to say, how can we adjust these interventions, both school year and summer, in order to support students that are not yet getting what they need in our current environment. And so that would be kind of our approach. This does say to us that the results are stable, but we know we need to accelerate learning outcomes, and it's through those spotlight systems and the approach in the 3 tiers that we really see the opportunity to be successful in accelerating learning.
And I would like to chime in on that. Something that we've done, Stacy mentioned quite a bit, and it would take a long time to go into all, but I will say, as we looked at our spotlight systems around really actually breaking down assessments, deconstructing learning standards. That's the first process in our 6 instructional systems, is we think about literacy and we see how students are engaging or being able to really review student authentic work. We've maximized, we began led by Dr. Kilgotti and Mr. Little, our PLC design, being sure that our PLCs are valuable and effective and that they're used in the right way. We're getting ready to launch a curriculum audit. And I just want to be honest, we're concerned about what we're getting from our Lucy Calkins curriculum. I want to call it what it is. I don't want to dance around with that. We know that has been problematic for us in some of the work that we've done. While it's benefited a certain population of students, it has not had the same benefits for our Black and Brown. And so we will be, and when we go through the audit, we will see some other things. And I don't know if Dr. Green wants to chime in, but there are some findings that came out in the fall regarding Lucy Calkins and her own work. I don't know if you all are familiar with it, but it's been pretty serious, and we are aware of it.
I would just concur with what Dr. Horton has shared. I think there's been some admissions by the Calkins team in relation to the phonemic awareness work, some of the foundational reading, foundational literacy supports that are definitely have been on our radar for sure, but to have that admission coming from the Calkins team, the Teachers College, has been important for us to pay attention to.
I'm sorry. Again, I want to thank the team for sharing some of the data, and again trying to finally getting this to a measure that is consistent, right? And like you're saying, now the move is to make sure that we now build on this consistent measure, and really try to build out the capacity of our children to be successful in literacy. And as we talk about strategies, right, one other thing I'd like to hear is making sure that the educators, right, who are in charge of ensuring that there's a smooth transition between 8th grade and freshman year, and have an opportunity to dialogue and meet. So I'm not sure if that happens already, but making sure that there's a community of practice, and that given that COVID is forcing us to rethink how we approach education, creating opportunities and spaces for dialogue between educators, right, that can help us focus on this joint literacy skill and help us close that opportunity gap, right, and the capacity gap, and making sure that educators from 8th grade reading teaching team and educators are meeting together with our 9th grade educators around literacy. And I say this, having seen collaboration between within our school district in 65, where we have our kindergarten teachers meet with our pre-K teachers in order to really make sure that the transitions are smooth as possible, right? And the children know, but the educators know what each part of the system does. And because I think for me, where we lose our kids is in those transitions. And it's particularly those kids who, again, don't know have families who don't know or aren't really sure how to navigate the system as effectively and advocate. Making sure that we have our educators who are on the front lines and making sure they have opportunities to collaborate and talk about the work that they do and dialogue, I think would be very beneficial as we think about, improving literacy outcomes for all kids in Evanston and Spokane.
Yeah, Biz.
I think we have seen some progress in our kindergarten readiness numbers, and we saw some really promising things coming out of our pre-K. And I think we all have had conversations about how important those investments are in early childhood. I am concerned that we're missing another targeted area in middle school. I think that for some of our kids who are identified early, if they don't catch up, they're never catching up, right? And so I think we need to think about what is a robust intervention that we can be targeting at our middle school age for the kids who have already fallen behind or are newly falling behind there, so that when they're transitioning to high school, there's already been another level of intervention. And I'm not saying we don't do some of those things, but I think that we need a pretty robust plan for that age. The other piece that I'm wondering in terms of our shared data, when we try to make this actionable, I think it's hard across a district or across two districts to know exactly where the coaching and the support needs to go. So I would love for us to add a layer where we are dialing down this information into what schools some of these numbers are coming from, right? What middle school we're seeing, what elementary school, what, is it in 10th grade with these teachers, like really being able to identify kind of what, where are we making progress on those gaps and where are we not? And so that we can have more targeted coaching and teaching for educators across our two districts, because I think it's very easy to not see yourself inside this data. And so having some more information about exactly where we're struggling would be a good use of information.
So Biz, I want to say you brought up two strong points. The first one is we are currently evaluating our intervention support. Stacey, I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but in our middle schools, we have not resourced them properly in regards to how we are to support students who have literacy reading issues in the middle school. While our teachers do their best and they stretch themselves as far as they can, we have to put some other resources in place to give them the opportunity to develop those reading skills. So there will be some new intervention processes coming in, with literacy being the center of that. And Dr. Beardsley and the team, they're looking at some models and going through a compression process right now to identify specifically what that will look like. And then there's we have a group that we're meeting with, members of 202, the MEAC, and plus some members of 202. Not only are we looking to design literacy support, but also our college and career readiness piece. And we know that that's a major part. We have Mr. Little along with Kirby, who's been working with the team, and we have compression and members that's on this call. Part of that alignment, I think you got a great idea, Biz, around how do we flow and follow students from Shute and Haven and Nichols and King Arts to see how they're performing. It's a good measuring tool that we would like to use. And I believe that in this design, as we think about redesigning our middle schools and then doing these partnerships and this other joint piece that we're doing with 202, we can make that happen as far as knowing where our students are and where to provide supports on the front end once we look at the data of how these students are performing when they get to high school.
That would be good. I think, smart strategic interventions that are related to the data are really important. And I think, we've all identified that this is a problem, and we all identified that there are certain things that will help, but we want to make sure we're giving the right supports to the right place. And if we're seeing that it's emerging from, and have accountability for if those gaps are continuing in certain spaces, then we need to make changes.
So I'm also thinking about how we tackled the challenge of kindergarten readiness with our early childhood programs in a successful way. If we think about what is proficient literacy on STAR as a high school readiness indicator, then I guess I hear what you're saying, that Lucy Calkins is not a curriculum that is accelerating literacy in the ways that we need to see it, and also some lack of supports at the middle school to help folks accelerate their literacy has been the reason why we've seen some of those lackluster numbers in the trends. But I'm also curious, so one of the challenges with early childhood was that TS Gold's measure for proficiency was not adequate for K readiness measure of proficiency. So I'm curious if we look at high school readiness proficiency as the RIT, the proficient RIT target on STAR, is proficient on MAP also, or is it exceeds expectations on MAP that is equivalent to proficient on STAR? Does that make sense? Are we asking children to meet expectations, and those expectations are adequately preparing them for high school readiness, or do they need to exceed expectations in order to adequately prepare for high school readiness?
Hey, Kylie, do you want to pick up on that, or should I?
I can start, and you can fill in any gaps I might miss. That is an excellent question. Thank you so much for that great question. And that is the work that I think that we really dug into with the ETHS team in a really deep way last year to make sure that we were intelligently and strategically aligning our measures to ensure that proficiency meant the same thing across our different assessments and across our different districts. And so the work that we did to come up with those 4 mutually exclusive categories for our cohort analysis to make sure that we were selecting RIT bands and STAR proficiencies that really ensured that we were talking about the same things in the same way, that brought us and led us to the place we are today, which is a much more solid ground of understanding of where we are and where we need to go. I do think that we have a great opportunity in District 65 to be looking at so many years worth of student information and really spanning, honestly, not just the K-8 span, but also like birth to 8, right? So we have such an advantage in our district to do a lot of what Sergio was talking about, really be looking at the whole gamut of student learning experience. And so not only do we have this shared understanding and this analysis that gives us a clear measure of those benchmarks that are going to convey proficiency towards this goal attainment, but we are also internally in District 65 working really closely with educators and administrators to revise a lot of the other sources of information so that we're really triangulating the data across multiple fields. So we're looking at our MAP data, but we're also working to revise our grading structures. We're working to revise our report cards, working to ensure that our priority standards and learning targets are very clear, very well aligned, and really robust. That, coupled with the spotlight systems and PLC work we discussed earlier, will really help us to create even further opportunity. And so I think that as we work more closely with JEH and the early childhood team, we're learning a lot from them about supporting kindergarten readiness. We're working really closely to have 8th grade teachers work with the 9th grade teachers and develop those internal structures to foster more collaboration. So I do think we have really clear measures moving forward, and we're developing the measures that need additional clarity to help us really be able to triangulate. So it's exciting. It's a lot of work, but it has great potential for us and our kids.
Thank you. Thank you. Suni.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Kylie. That definitely does sound really exciting and promising. I guess I would just, one thing that I noticed and is missing in the data that we saw today, in the memo that we saw today, is that K through 2. This is a K through 12 literacy goal, and we're only seeing a portion of it. And so I always want to make sure that we're not losing those early grades, and that's going to be something that does get to reported at the board level, that we're not going to just only be starting with MAP, that we'll figure out what the assessments are and how we can include that K through 2 band to make sure that we are seeing the changes that we need to see over time, starting in pre-K, but certainly at least in kindergarten. And I would also ask if we can, I think visually a more helpful way to see the data too is, instead of these sort of discrete charts by grade, is I'm hoping that in future reports, now that we have like the system in place, that we can be doing this, that we can see more of like a graph of over time. I think that's how, as a board, how we're going to see whether or not we are making progress or not, what grade levels maybe we are making progress or not, is to be able to sort of see it all in a chart that way, as opposed to having to break it down separately. So I'm hoping in the future that can be a way that the data can be presented to us.
Thank you for that, Sonia. I would just like to add two things to what you're saying, connecting to what you're saying. I know that Kylie, she's like a master of our Domo, our dashboard system. So I'm sure that, I know you, the board, you're tired of hearing me say that. But we would definitely take on that challenge of creating a structure that would allow that data to be able to tell the story in a over the course of time. But we do have a platform that can do it. And then also, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure this is true. We now are giving MAP to our kindergarten through second grade. So we will have, while our data is a little inconsistent from the previous years in our K through 2, and not because it was something wrong, it was just trying to find the right assessment that makes sense. We will be able, moving forward, we should be able to have some data that's aligned that don't require my team to like really dig in too deep and try to make the two assessment systems align. But very good point around getting that K through 2 data ready.
All right. Anya, did you have your hand up, or are we ready to move on?
Yeah, I did. I just had one other inquiry, which is there's a significant trend, racialized trend in IEP data for District 65. And so I had the curiosity when I was looking at the racialized trends in the outcomes for the joint literacy goal, how much is that influenced by the IEP data that disproportionately impacts Black and Brown students? And so I'm curious how we include the progress, the literacy progress for students who have IEPs in this reporting process, and have an idea of how students with IEPs are attaining this joint literacy goal.
Yeah, I'll start with this, and then I may ask colleagues to jump in as well. So, in our planning with the high school, we worked to come to shared consensus for what we were going to include in here. Obviously, there's so many different very important cuts of data that we can include. And we both do additional reporting for our various districts. I know that we had a very valuable report on the outcomes for our students with disabilities led by Dr. D. Cristofaro, and we will be bringing forward to our board and everyone in Evanston, right? Everybody who's watching this call, please join us. We love to have participants and members of the community at our board meetings. So, and members of the ETHS board as well, you're always welcome. We'll be having a really wonderful presentation in March that includes a really robust look, not just at literacy, but at a lot of different critical outcomes, including the disproportionality aspect that you're noting. And so I think that will be a good opportunity for us to really have a wealth of information to dig into these questions and make sure that we are also addressing the needs of our students with IEPs. Dr. D. Cristofaro, do you want to add to that?
That's really all I was going to say, is that a lot of this information I'm pulling right now to present to you all in a few weeks from now.
Thank you.
Okay, why don't we move on? Who's going to be our next presenter?
So I'm going to have Scott start this one. We're going to be talking about the Literacy Partnership Update. The report's going to highlight two of our current literacy partnerships between 65 and 202, specifically the Summer Lift program. We're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk about the work to build literacy teacher capacity in both districts in a partnership effort. So, and Scott, you have a presentation to share, correct?
Yes, I do. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here.
And then, of course, the rest of the team will chime in and we'll do all that too.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for that conversation and this conversation that will ensue shortly about this update. I am joined by Dr. Kiwana Brown this evening, and Dr. Stacy Beardsley will be joining me as well from 65 to talk about this update. Dr. Brown is a little under the weather today, a little bit of a sore throat, so she might not speak as much, but if we have questions for her, we'll call upon her to come forward, but I'm going to try to help her out and handle the majority of this tonight. So we just really wanted to bring forth some of the shared work that we're able to do, and I think Sergio asked about some of that transition planning that we do, and we have been able to do that in the past, and we look to continue to do that. That's been actually one of the strengths of our partnership, is when we bring our 8th grade and 9th grade faculty together and the teacher aides from District 65 who work with reading. We've been able to share our scope and sequence of curriculum, our assessments, the work that we're doing in our literacy lab at ETHS. It's been a very strong partnership, and post-pandemic, we look to continue it in person to get folks back together to work on that. So, but tonight we're focusing on one of the collaborations that has been extremely successful, and we're super excited about it and has a great potential to continue to serve our community for years to come. So we're very excited to present to you information from your packet specific to the program known as Summer Lift. And this is a program that's been in place for the past 2 years. And as Stacy talked about earlier, this is a student-focused Tier 3 intervention. So we have a 1-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio in terms of this intervention program. And it is geared towards specific literacy instructional needs of students. So as opposed to maybe some of our group or programmatic pieces that happen during the school year, this is individualized what each student needs based on the assessments that we give pre and post. To be able to build a specific curriculum to work on with each student. And again, through some donations that we'll learn about later, we've been able to have a 1-to-1 ratio throughout this program, which has been extremely beneficial to our students. I think that this program really highlights, as you'll see, that when we can invest in that level of intervention and support for our most striving readers, that we're able to have success in terms of growth and grade level growth through the program. The nice thing about this program is it is one of the opportunities that we have where we're able to serve students from both school districts in our partnership. And we've been able to serve students from rising 2nd graders to rising 12th graders, partnering to provide early support and intervention by including District 65 students, as well as continued support and intervention for our high school age students as well. And like I said, this has run for the past 2 years. In 2019, the first year that we ran this, we had 28 students participate or were invited to participate, 14 from each district. And this past year in 2020, we had 30 students invited to participate, 15 from each district. And I want to just highlight the 2020 summer program. As you may all recall, as you heard 50 plus comments tonight about reopening schools one way or another, the 2020 program happened during the COVID-19 global pandemic. And so we were able to continue this level of support, albeit remotely, and still have extreme success during the remote delivery of this intervention program, which again is surprising, and it's excellently surprising. We were very pleased to see that happened. Just a little bit of background on the intervention. So we do look at growth. We try to assess for growth. And the intervention program is modeled after a research-based literacy lab program that is housed at Northeastern Illinois University, with whom we have a great partnership, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And the use of the basic reading inventory, the Johns inventory, to assess students at the beginning and the end of the program is used. So we do provide this level of data. We provide reports to families. We provide, the research-based assessment intervention reports to families, but we also provide anecdotal narrative comments about the experience. And as you'll see from some of our student comments, the students have a sense of belonging, and they feel that they are treated well and cared for in the program. And as we all know, when you're cared for and you see yourself and you feel seen, and it's a comfortable environment where the educator shows care and concern, you can grow and develop and have great success. And so again, this program is a testament to that. But in the program, we do look at these levels. We look at the instructional, independent, and frustration reading levels, both orally and silently, as well as listening levels based on speed, word accuracy, and comprehension. And so we're getting a really holistic picture of a student's literacy abilities in the program so that we can create a plan tailored to each individual student's need. The Johns inventory is also used, in addition to being a pre and a post test, it's also used to determine the most effective literacy strategies to improve student success. So again, the data that is obtained from that basic reading inventory is used to also develop and tailor instructional plans for each student in the program. So we'll go over a little bit of the high-level growth data from the summer from both years, and we did break this out by district and by year. So you can see just some high-level average grade level growth. So the average grade level growth in the first year for District 65 students, again, was 2.0, 2 grade levels. And in 2019, this program ran for 11 consecutive Saturdays in the summer, on Saturdays, students coming every Saturday for several hours to work with an interventionist. So again, the commitment that the families made to have this experience, the level of commitment that the students showed, and the level of growth was just fantastic. At District 202 in that first year, again, the average level of growth was 2.7 grades. And again, this is the average level of growth. There are many different ways to look at this, but we felt this would tell the strongest picture and the clearest picture of the impact of the program. Again, that happened 11 consecutive Saturdays where students were coming to the high school. And these are high schoolers now coming on Saturday in the summer to work with an interventionist on reading. So if you can paint that picture for yourself. In 2020, this past summer, again, in District 65, we see a 1.8 average grade level growth. This is during the pandemic, using remote instruction as the intervention. So I just want to note that. Again, and then for District 202, 2.1. So again, we don't see the same strength of level of average growth this year, but we still see this level of growth. And every student grew at least a grade level, except for 2 students. And so I think when you consider everything, right, all those factors, being in the summer, being during the global pandemic, being remote, and again, this would have been June, so this is right kind of after we've had that weird second semester after the initial pandemic hit. Again, I think this really speaks to the strength of the program and the design of the intervention being so individualized. In 2020, because it was remote and because we were doing the model a little bit differently in the summer lift, students worked with an interventionist each day for approximately an hour for 15 straight days, school days. And so we changed the model because of the remote nature and because of how we structured the lab. So in 2020, students participated in this experience for 15 days of summer school, as opposed to on Saturdays. So we'll talk a little bit about how the lab was staffed and all that momentarily, but just a couple snapshots of student feedback. And so again, I think this is really telling. We have that qualitative or that quantitative data that speaks to the assessment, but then we also have this qualitative piece where we have 100% of the students agree that the program helped them achieve their individual academic goals. So again, students are setting goals, working with the interventionist. Students indicated it was helpful, their reading improved, they read more often than previously, and it helped them with reading and comprehension. So you can't get any better than that in a program designed to support students to address their reading needs. All students on the survey that we gave either responded strongly agreed or had a neutral response when asked if they see their reading stamina increase. So again, if you think about students who are reading multiple grade levels behind, striving readers, to be able to increase your reading stamina is a great end product of the intervention. And as that continues to grow and grow, students being able to show more success with reading and with their literacy-based activities and assessments in their academic performance is going to be something that we're actually going to look to see if we can identify going forward, getting permission from some of the families when they sign up for Summer Lift for this upcoming summer, to see if we can actually do some data sharing between the districts to see, okay, if we're serving students in the summer through this program, how are they transferring those skills and that experience during the school year back in District 65 and also in 202. And so when we meet as a collaborative team, we can share those results, not only of the summer, but also of how are students performing during the school year, which I think is going to be an extremely illuminating process and will help us continue to target how we can support students in both districts. And lastly, you can see there students reporting that it was important to work with someone who was nice to them, and just thinking, again, that social emotional aspect of whole child education, where if you're going to be working with me on something that I need to face as a challenge for myself, I need to be able to trust you and believe that you care about me in order to find success. And the students reiterated that point. So it's a part of the research base that informed our program, but it's also being reaffirmed by our students. I think I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Beardsley now to talk a little bit about the community partnerships and how we were able to structure the lab support for Summer Lift.
Thank you, Scott. So this program, Summer Lift, is really supported by some really important relationships and partners. When we think about what's helping to make this program come together, District 65 and 202 have been collaborating in the process of identifying students and also in sharing some of the literacy lab practices and experiences that we have in interventions. Specifically, we also are benefiting from private donor support and support from Foundation 65 as we build the capacity of our educators. And as Scott mentioned earlier, NEIU is a really strong partner in this program, has allowed some of the coursework to occur at ETHS and is allowing the practicum work when our individuals are working towards reading specialist or reading teacher endorsements to happen within our community. And so when we think about the work that's contributing to the success of the Summer Lift program, 202 has been committed to creating opportunities and tuition sharing arrangements for some of the 202 educators to earn the reading specialist and reading teacher endorsement, which is bringing some of the capacity and the specialization knowledge to support the learning outcomes. And then similarly, Foundation 65 and District 65 are partnering to support and do tuition sharing with District 65 educators, a cohort of 12 staff members currently, to pursue their reading endorsement. Thank you, Scott. And so that partnership is continuing the capacity building work that we're doing. And Scott, you can move on to the next slide. And Scott, do you want to pick up on 202? And yep. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we through the generous support of our Board of Education, we were able to do some incentivization of taking the coursework 2 or 3 years ago. We've had one successful cohort already graduate. So they are working in our literacy lab right now. And for the 202 board, we're hopeful to present either in March or April a report specific to the literacy lab. We wanted to make sure that tonight's presentation was about our joint work, but we do have some really exciting success stories to share from the literacy lab. And so the students are being served there by interventionists who went through the NEIU cohort program. And so it's been a great investment in capacity that is really being put to direct use to support students' needs in our building. And again, thinking about this is offered during the summer, which is a great opportunity in the summer, and we're seeing great growth. But to be able to present and provide that same level of Tier 3 individualized support to students during the school year has been extremely helpful as well. And you'll see that report, like I said, in the future. But we do have 11 staff members who have already gone through. We have a new cohort that formed, and 2 of our staff members are part of the new cohort that Stacy mentioned. Several District 65 teachers are a part of as well. And so I just wanted to talk really briefly before we close out about the the lab experience during Summer Lift. The first summer in 2019, we were able to run the Summer Lift program as the practicum experience for that first cohort of teachers going through the certification program at NEIU. And so one of the great advantages to the partnership is that rather than having our teachers work with students in Chicago, which there's nothing wrong with that, but if we want to be able to serve our local community, we were able to get them to agree to have the practicum experience be in our local community with our students. And so that happened in 2019. In 2020, this past year, we were able to pay teachers to work in Summer Lift through a generous private donation through the ETHS Foundation. And so because we didn't have a cohort going through their practicum experience, we were able to support that through the private donation to pay for their salaries. And so again, we're hoping to do that this upcoming summer. And we have some private donors who are interested in continuing to support the program into the future and expanding the access and opportunity for more students from District 65 as well. So I think that this is a huge foundational piece that we can continue to grow for years to come as we continue to commit to providing this level of support for our students. And that's the end of the presentation.
Awesome. Very exciting. Wonderful. Really good. It's great to see those cohorts and grow and the amazing work you're doing with students. Really good. Excellent. Okay, board. Any questions from the board?
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks so much for the report. I'm wondering if you could take a minute, given the prior discussion of the joint literacy goal, and connect up this Summer Lift project with the overarching literacy goal and talk a little bit about how it fits within this broader structure of achieving literacy for all of our students.
Yeah, do you want me to start with that, Stacy?
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, so yeah, I think the ultimate goal of Summer Lift continues to be connected to that larger goal of trying to have all of our students read at grade level, right? And so when we look to identify students who participate, we're looking to invite students who we have already identified as heading down that progression, as was talked about earlier, early warning signs of showing that they might be not reading at grade level early on. And so we work with Elizabeth and Stacy in District 65 and the reading team, teachers and support staff in District 65 to identify the students who are most at need. And then we invite them into the program. And so again, due to capacity, again, this is a 1-to-1 ratio. We're looking at the most identified student need in both districts. And so as we're tracking that, we're trying to match that up with the intervention.
Yeah, that was, you were sort of getting at the point of my question, which is, it seems like a relatively small number for the reasons you said, but obviously something we would prefer to scale up if we could and we had the funding. So my part 2 of this is, I think you alluded to it at the end. It looks like we're seeking more funding. We're going to try and scale it up. And it's, I would imagine, dependent on funding and not so much the fact that there's the need. We have the need. There's more kids who could benefit. So we need to expand the funding. And then how big do you see this getting? And then the second question is, over time, is there a plan to keep track of whether these gains are sustainable going forward? I'm curious about whether, I mean, I'm not the educator here, but I know that we hear about backslide and summer learning loss and, places where kids lose ground. And so I'm wondering if that's a concern here and if there's plans to keep track of that and or try and avoid it.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Don.
I want to speak from 65's position. So we are in the process.
To find who's speaking. Thank you. Sorry.
All right. We are in the process in 65 to build out a pretty progressive and aggressive summer intervention program. And I want us all to just remember as we approach this work, there are three layers that we got to be conscious of around these tiers. What we're speaking of right now and what we've been able to do in partnership with 202 is really tier 3 work, right? And we're not able to serve a lot of students, but we are working on a plan to extend that learning in the summer. And also, and even when school is back in session, Gretchen, as you think about how do we make sure that this work is sustained. But when we talk about our tier 1 instruction, which is the best defense to make sure that our students are reading and attaining at the level that they need to be, that's where those elements that we spoke of, and this is where the trainings come in really handy as we talk about making sure that teachers are not just finding ways to support intervention, but are doing it at the highest level for our tier 1s, and challenging them for our tier 2 students, being sure that they use the PLC structure to go back and redesign some of that literacy support. And then tier 3 is where what we're talking about tonight, that we find ways to keep those processes going, not just in the summer, but throughout the course of the school year. As you spoke of, it sounds like, how do we maintain interventions at level 3s, as for tier 3s, for 365? And that is something that my team and I have been discussing. We just released an RFP to our community partners. We've had some community partners to jump on board. We have some strong community partners that's working with us that focus on some heavier aspects of their program is focused on literacy. And then we've also sent it to schools. So I would say, I don't know, Scott, if this has been discussed with you, but if this is something that we're looking to expand potentially, maybe that could be a part of the RFP can be completed to make sure that this program grows and that 65 can put in some of our dollars to make that connection too.
Thank you so much, Dr. Horton. Yeah, I think the one thing I was just going to add is that we talked this year. We're super excited that we're going to reach out to families to gain their permission to do some data sharing around this program so that we can track the students' performance during the school year who participated in the lab. We know at 202, because we can look at that for ourselves, that learning continues. And this was one of the interventions that we tried to use to target that quote unquote summer slide that we read about, because it happens in the summer. So it's a way to continue learning in the summer. And so how do we then continue that? And how do we provide teachers during the school year that information so that they can continue to support that learning? And so that's how, when we look at our STAR data and we look at our individual, instructional planning reports out of STAR, when we continue to do that progress, we're being able to provide our teachers with that additional layer of information and continue that. So we're hopeful to do that for District 65 students as well throughout the school year. We can share how the summer experience went and then how that looks as it's continuing into the school year. So we have a great foundation to be able to do that, and we're excited to do that moving forward.
And Scott, two other things. I would like for us to also just to share that our bilingual programming, our TWE programming, we're adopting a new literacy curriculum. And I do know this, and Stacy, tell me if I'm wrong. I believe that Betsy Rhodes, they put in an application to do an RFP for our TWE for literacy this summer. That is something that we also in the district, as our population continue to grow, we want to be conscious and cognizant of how we provide those supports as well. And I'm not sure how that's connected with what you all are doing right now, but I definitely know that's an arm that we need to put in place sooner than later.
Excellent.
Can I ask a question? Well, not really a question. Can I just, well, maybe it is, I don't know. I'm wondering, like, what I'm hearing from the report on the data that we just got, the historical data, the partnerships, the interventions, and all the other things that we're talking about that go into us achieving this literacy goal. Does it make sense that the next step, or one of the next steps, is to create some sort of operational plan that includes the inputs along with the accountabilities? So all of this is kind of brought together as we move forward. So we're able to see the interventions, we're able to know, what's happening at District 65, what's happening at 202 to move us towards achieving this goal. We've been on data forever. So we've got that, right? We're there with that, yay. So now how do we start moving forward, tracking the activities, tracking the accountabilities, and moving us closer to that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to ask Kylie to chime in a little bit about what we're doing around that action, and also if Underleave can speak to this, some of the work that we're doing to make sure that it's moving forward. And then we have a Miracles framework where a lot of this lives, and I don't want to go too far into that discussion, but definitely knowing that there is a process. I would love to plug that component into what 202 is doing so that the operational plan could be fluid, Monique. So Kylie.
Yeah, because what I'm hoping is that we can get together and do that together. You know what I'm saying? So it's truly a plan that we're both working on. But yeah, that's it.
You know what I like about what I'm hearing the two of you say is if we really develop an operational plan together, we can be we're more intentional about overlapping. You know, I don't think it just butts up against one another. I think somehow there needs to be an overlap for us to be most effective at this.
Well, it makes sense as well, because then the districts can anticipate what's going to happen at some point in the future. So 65 can better prepare students for their high school experience around literacy, which is, in my opinion, the whole purpose of the literacy goal. I'm really appreciating this discussion because operational accountability, these have been the missing pieces. We've been collecting a lot of data, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it seems like, or at least it has for me, that one of the purposes of the literacy goal was to collect data. But in my mind, I'm thinking the purpose of the literacy goal is to track how our students are doing and to make changes in their instructional experience as we can anticipate the students who might struggle, so that by the time they leave us, they have stronger skills. So that's been what I've hoped to see happen. And this discussion makes me feel hopeful because we're not talking about data so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great discussion. I love talking about data, so you'll have to forgive me. But I think it's really important now that we've established really clear foundation of where we are and we all jointly agree. Now we can start to move the data into action. The data doesn't do our students any good until we unlock the potential of the data and turn it into actionable strategies. I can share very briefly some of the things we're doing at District 65 that I think have really remarkable promise for how we move things forward. And I think that, we have a great collaboration going now with our team to really be able to expand and build on the successes. So in District 65 this year, we have really done quite a bit to deepen cycles of inquiry and cycles of learning related to data. We are having school reality check meetings where we bring in school leadership teams and we do a facilitated protocol to really investigate the data, multiple data sets, to really dig in and do some kind of dialogue and kind of a root cause analysis in the moment of where do you think you're seeing improvements? How do you build on those successes? And how do you address the areas of for growth and for improvement? Because, we have to also recognize that the data doesn't tell a full story. Mm-hmm. The data tells a partial story, and it doesn't tell all of the strengths. And so as we work internally in the district, we provide public data reporting that's really aggregated. And essentially, it gives you kind of a high-level map. When we work with our schools, we're getting down to like the GPS coordinates of that map. We're using a geolocator to really tell you with precision where things are. And so, that's some work that we're doing that people don't necessarily see It's internal work. You don't see that, but that's the kind of the stuff. That's the stuff that makes the magic of learning happen. And working with our teachers in the PLCs, they're really digging into the information and the data. And then they're also looking not only with their grade level team, but that vertical planning. And I think the more we could do that vertical planning around our curriculum and around the supporting transitions for students with the high school in collaboration with the high school, I think what Dr. Brownlee and Dr. Beardsley have done has really, it's a demonstration of the success of our collaborative efforts. And so the more we can do work like that, where we all kind of contribute to the shared development of our ongoing collaboration, the better our students will be when they go forward in their academic career to college and career and onward. So,
and I can say, in all honesty, and as I pull us out of the data hive that Kylie was in, I can hear it in the conversations and the discussions with our principals and APs, and we're now in our second round of our reality checks. And so those numbers are one thing, but we're hearing them reference back to actions and decisions that they've made to change how they're approaching supporting their teachers around PLC work, around like that, just the best practices for delivering high quality instruction, which is the purpose of data, right? At some point that those numbers have to change and shift into action. And we are starting to hear and see, from getting into classrooms at really high frequency levels. The principals could talk to you about that as well. So I think there's an opportunity here to expand that and maybe grow out some of the work that we're doing to make sure that it stays connected with 202, and we don't have to. And I think that the team that Scott and Stacy's done some great work, and I would like to keep that moving. And how do we make it better moving forward, and even expanding it to some other areas as well.
Pat, I'd like to jump in here.
Yes, Jude, go ahead.
So thank you for the work that you all are doing. It's very, very difficult work. Your heart can be in the right place, and still at times you may not hit the mark. So we're in a difficult situation of having to do triage to stop the bleeding as students continue to matriculate through our school system, because what the data also shows is as they matriculate, Black and brown students fall further and further behind. So what we're talking about right now is the triage work. So I'd like to take us back to the root, where the root of the problem is, which the data also says. We know the students who aren't prepared to go into kindergarten. And the data also says, I've seen the map of where early childhood education experiences happen formally in this town. And most of them are not happening in the wards where Black and brown children live. So there's clearly a disparity, and there has been generationally, on the quality of early childhood education and the access to formal, because there are many mom and pops doing it out of the house. And is there alignment between what our children are getting in those spaces and what the expectations are as they come into the district? And the data is showing that there isn't in most cases, in many cases. So it's a difficult situation because of funding and because of jurisdiction, but it also has been illustrated that there is not alignment historically in early childhood education and District 65. And I look at this as a community issue because there are so many, and there's been so much work done in the early childhood community. And I really want to commend everyone involved, service providers, parents, everyone. But at the end of the day, if we know consistently these students who we're trying to do triage with not come unprepared for kindergarten, can somebody speak to what is being done, what type of traction we're making in terms of shoring up our early childhood education delivery here in the city of Evanston?
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I was going to say, just was it last month, Dr. Sprague, our early childhood director, gave a really wonderful report on just the questions that you're asking. So I would encourage you to go back. I think you can download the report from the District 65 website, but and I can't speak to it as eloquently as she did, but overall, what she's been able to do with her team has really led to improved kindergarten readiness assessment scores this most recent assessment round. So definitely has made some positive traction there. And I just know as a system, as an organization, the PLC work that they're doing in early childhood and just the peer observations and collaboration and deep dive into data and setting goals, it's really impressive. So I think there's a lot being done. I don't know if anybody else on my team wants to chime in, but I do think that we're moving in a really strong direction with regards to early childhood. And the most recent data does show that.
I can talk about not the piece that maybe Stacey can add to what you were referencing to, Romy, but I can chime in and say we are in the process of we've gotten a grant and we've accepted and we're building out an urban teacher residency. It's called CREATE. And we are in the process of working with National Lewis and Northwestern, where we will be able to build our own early childhood instructors. So as teachers retire, it's very hard to find teachers that could fit, that doesn't cost us out, or that are ready to come and work in 65. This is a very unique community. And so one of the things that we toyed around with, and we're talking with Dr. Sprague, is that she won't need to replace. We have 4 resident teachers that will build a year. They'll work with us forward. They'll be trained by us for a full year, get a master's from National Lewis, and then we'll hire them. Ideally, I think, Jude, what you got me thinking about, potentially as we work with other early childhood centers, maybe these teachers can be shared and placed in some of the other early childhood programs. And we can still provide some supports. Of course, I would need to, work with our board, and I'm sure they will be open to that. I can't speak for them, but I can't see them being against it, to actually spread some of that support. Early childhood, sometimes people think that's an easy degree and an easy field, and we all know that's not. It's one of the most challenging areas to work in. So those are just some ways that at 65, while we don't run those other organizations or other schools, we can provide some supports to build that relationship to those residents that's trained by us for us to teach at those facilities as well. So that's just a little something I wanted to put out there as a potential way to help extend our outreach, because it seems like our early childhood center is moving in the right direction.
And thank you, Dr. Horton, and welcome, by the way. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm encouraged too, because Cradle to Career has really masterfully brought all of the early childhood providers together. Not all the little mom and pops, but all of them in the city, and they are committed. And I do know that they look to District 65, Dr. Horton, to really help provide, if you will, kind of the concerted upgrading of what is available to the youth of the community. I think where they've been stymied is how do we get enough funding, or how do we expand this so that it really is reaching all the early childhood children in the community. And so I think we are really going to see, and thanks to District 65's leadership, a real upgrading of what kids are getting. But if we can work together, and I know the Community Foundation is committed to this, but this is going to take a real effort of resources to figure out what about all the kids that we miss.
If I could interject back to a point that Romy was making about the JEH, and this kind of ties back also to the reality checks that Kylie was referencing. From a most recent reality check from our JEH early childhood group, it was amazing to see the level of collaboration from the 0 to 3 program, the Family Center, in addition to the work that Sharon and her team is doing. Not so long ago, she presented a pretty robust strategic plan. And so it was very inspiring to see some of the work that has been moving as a result of that strategic plan. So that goes back to the pieces of tying things together in a way to track and see the movement over time. And so to see growth at a time of remote learning. But we also saw some pretty, talk about qualitative information, to hear the reports of how teachers are gaining a different appreciation for asset-based learning from families. Now that they're getting a peek at how families are supporting, it's also changing their mindsets about what can be gained from that dual relationship of seeing how parents and families are supporting their young students and young children. And so I can just say Sharon has referenced a lot of use of data, but also as a tool for their instruction and for what those changes would need to look like in the moment. I think the investment for us in terms of map fluency, not a perfect science, certainly not perfect in the middle of a pandemic, but just even having a consistent language of assessment to speak to TS goal, which is the primary assessment for early childhood, but then to even look at map fluency and kindergarten readiness in that regard provides an opportunity I haven't seen in a few years of us just even being able to talk the same assessment language, which is just so important, and really trying to shift educators' mind from assessment being a tool to demonize or being weaponized against their practice, but to be used as a tool to help encourage their knowledge of students has been pretty impactful to see too. So I think that and I like to think that Sharon's, the Dr. Sprague's entity in JEH, it's New York. If it can happen in our JEH, we know our programs are built for at-risk students and students who, come with pretty much a delegation of almost a label for having an IEP. And so to see growth, even in the middle of a pandemic, is pretty promising to us, certainly, and begs us to question some of the things that we might be able to learn as an organization from our early childhood for matriculating in K and beyond. So I just wanted to share that.
90% of those students are free and reduced lunch, as you spoke of, Dr. Green. Yeah.
Can I restate my question? Because I'm wondering, now that we have the data and we hear what's happening in 65 and, how do we bring together the joint in this? Like, how do we make sure together we are moving forward with achieving this joint literacy goal outside of just sharing data and creating the partnerships I know that were spoken of? How do we hold accountability so that everyone is moving in the same direction and it's under one goal? I'm not saying we need to rewrite the goal. I wasn't here when it was written. I think the goal is still very relevant, but I'm wondering, what was the plan after we gathered the data?
I guess I'll jump in really quickly, Monique. I think for me, as I hear the question, it obviously, with Dr. Horton and a lot of the new structures and systems and reimagining of curriculum and things that have just been spoken. I mean, he just touched on just a few of them this evening, but I think there's a great opportunity here to now reassess what the goal is. And so certainly we obviously want all of our students to be reading at grade level throughout our school district and within our community. But there are some new avenues that sound like they're going to be opening up to a deepening of our collaboration across the districts. And again, I'm not here to tell, pre-K teachers and kindergarten teachers and first grade teachers how to teach reading in the district. But I think if we are together at the table thinking about what the end goal is, and we're learning from each other's strategies and the systems, and we can contribute feedback, I'll just speak very personally, locally and immediately about my experience just in a short time with Dr. Green and Dr. Horton. Have continued the tradition that Stacy and I have had with the great collaboration, just with their reopening plan this summer, like welcoming me in to be a part of those conversations. It's very open, it's very collaborative. There's a great sense of urgency around these topics. And so I would say that I think if we have some time, we've been in such a survival mode of addressing the current pandemic, but when we get to the other side of that and can sit down and have some deeper conversations about this goal and what's changing in both districts, how we're evolving in both districts, that we'll find the spots where we can come together. And again, hearing tonight, it sounds like, as we continue to report on this, as we continue to provide feedback to the boards about how we're progressing, those pieces will be able to be brought to forward. We have a good structure in place for the quantitative data that we're measuring the goal by. Now we can start looking at, okay, where are the new avenues that have really been presented? I mean, just in hearing some of the things that came up tonight, I got some notes down, for some things to follow up with District 65 on that I think can be great points of collaboration. So I think we have good systems and structures that are coming down the road here as things are being evolved in both districts. And I think we have a commitment within both districts to be working together to identify ways that we can support the larger goal for all of our students in the community. So I'm really excited about the potential here.
And I just want to really urge us, let's not be just a bunch of adults talking. Let's really get on this. Because I'm on the receiving end, and I don't mean from District 65, I'm talking about age group. The older an individual gets, the more profound the effect becomes on their inability or deficiency in reading. And you just see it. And you realize that, if you're a sophomore and you can't read at the level of the materials that are being used in the class, you can see it in a child's eyes. They know they can't read. They know they can't keep up with the other kids, and it doesn't get any easier junior and senior year and planning what to do after high school. So I just want us to really remember, we shouldn't just be talking and come back again the next time we meet and talk some more. We really got to get this operationalized. We got kids in the community who really lack the reading skills to progress the way they should be able to in their lives. And I know we all know that, but we can't lose sight of it. Real simply, may sound like a cliche, but it's the truth. Reading is the gateway to all learning. And we have to do this for our children.
Yeah, I said your hand. You can go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So one, I think Dr. Green and Dr. Horton, you did allude to this, but I just wanted to highlight specifically that JEH serves primarily Black and Brown students and students with IEPs, and also 90% free and reduced lunch. So for us to double the amount of children who are kindergarten ready coming out of JEH is a recipe for closing the gap in opportunity to achieve. And it is what our kids and families deserve, and it's what we need to continue to do over and over. And if we can spread that good news around our community, I think we'd be thrilled as a board to support that. I think also, how we engage families with this conversation is important. And so part of, ensuring that we have more students who are kindergarten ready has to do with our educators collaborating with one another and deprivatizing their practice and, interrogating data. But it also has to do with families understanding what they're supporting their children towards. And I think high school readiness is related to that as well. And so I just wonder how, now that we have this data, we've aligned how it's being measured, how can we communicate with families so that they understand if their child is on track to be ready for high school literacy or not, and what they can do. And that may be supporting their child in receiving tier 2 interventions or tier 3 interventions. But I think we can't underestimate the how families are compelled to help their children reach their full aptitudes, and how they are partners with us in this exercise. And I think it's something really, it's a really tangible benchmark that I think folks can hold on to. And so I'm curious, when we're thinking about like report card redesign, when we're thinking about parent-teacher conferences and redesigning that process, how do we let folks know early on if their child is on track to meet high school literacy goals, and if not, what we are doing to provide interventions and what they can do at home and in the community to ensure that their child does reach that goal.
If I may.
Go ahead, Anjali.
No, I was just going to say that I think what you just shared lines up really quite well with one of the initiatives that we've been focusing on recently, which is really thinking about our grading practices, both our grading practices as well as what is in our report card, and thinking about what are those expectations, what does grading for equity look like, and really thinking about the kinds of standards that are going to be, that our students are pursuing. I would also add that connected to that is really, even in the work of connecting with families about what the expectations are, or really what our teachers are doing. I think that there's been a tremendous partnership this year through our 6 systems, which you've heard mentioned quite a few times this evening, of really raising a higher level of focus on the alignment of what our curriculum is driving versus what are the standards and what are the things that we expect our students to need, what do our students need to know, and how are we measuring that progress. So, thinking about the use of formative assessment and really helping our teachers and our school leaders really collaborate together to be clearer about those various elements. And so I think that, when we think about the 6 systems, I'll just name them because I'm not sure if we've actually hit them tonight, but one is really that the standards and curriculum implementation, thinking about those standards. The second one is the effective use of data. We've heard tonight, what's the accountability? So really it goes down to the effective use of data really to drive instruction. The third system is collaboration, planning, and instructional planning for learning. So really we mentioned professional learning communities. So that's been the bedrock that we've really used this year to bring teachers together to reflect on our own practice. Because as we know, this gap is not going to go away if we don't get together and problem solve. And we know that you got to go together and not individually. And so it's got to be a collaborative effort to learn together. The fourth system is progress monitoring and analysis of student work. Really then thinking about the climate and culture, which is really system 5, and then system 6 is really the coaching and the feedback that principals are giving. This year, it's been a huge effort, and I think this is an area of collaborative where I know across Dr. Campbell and I, we've talked about in the past about instructional rounds across both systems, and maybe there's opportunities for looking into practices. So system 6 is really about really the feedback, and our principals and coaches have been really getting onto the ground level to see what instruction looks like. Because without that, ultimately, if we're not really paying attention if we're not closely paying attention to instruction, then we're not going to see the shifts. Everything we know about change in practice and moving towards equity in our learning for our students is definitely correlated to the way in which what happens in the classroom. And so I think that's the result of that relationship of increased coaching across the system. So I just thought it was important as we think about accountability and some joint work. I wanted to share those systems, and I'd be happy to. I know we'd be happy to share those 6 systems to then see if there's a way to make some cross connections across both systems.
And thanks for that, Angela. Some things that I would like to highlight as Anya asked about, we are actually in the process of getting our FACE team and some others trained. And I don't know how familiar you are with Dr. Karen Mapp's family support work, which will lead into better structures around getting families involved and extending their learning from the school into the home. You have to be very intentional about that. So that's some of the things that we're doing that's not necessarily data driven, but more about the action that I continue to hear as something that we want to see more of. So that's one. And then I'm going to also go out and say that when you talk about our instructional work, like when we go back to the learning standards, it is important that our teachers have the tools to be able to deconstruct learning standards as we're looking at how students are performing on the data. As we talk about moving forward, the next step would be, let's make sure that they can take that data that we're referencing and be able to see where the kids are having the gaps in the literacy, right? And then that is like the first level of this work that we're doing. And it seems like a heavy lift. It's really best practice. And sometimes we get, as educators, we get bombarded and caught up in adding new. Well, what we put on our plate for this year in 65, we plan to keep that on the only thing that we move for the next 3 to 4 years as we master it. And so that is something also that I would say. Last thing, I think, Dr. Green, that I'm going to say tonight, I promise you, I think that Dr. Green will be leading in partnership with Mr. Little and Dr. Kilgotti are these instructional rounds. I see this as an opportunity, potentially now listening to everyone tonight, that maybe these ICRs could be something that we bring some high school team members into our schools to do some instructional rounds with us, and we go over to the high school and do them as well. Of course, when COVID gets a little bit better. But I think those are opportunities. We talk about what are some actions that we can put into moving forward. So I'm going to try to shut down. All right.
And I'm actually going to move us along. I'm going to move us along. We have another big item that we want to discuss here, but I'm just really going to encourage the collaboration to continue around this operationalizing this work on our literacy goal. Really, like Kylie said, putting the data into action. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that's what we need to do. And I am going to move us along. So our next item is our equity discussion. And who is going to start this off for us? Dr. Campbell, are you going to get us going?
Hey, hello. Yes, I sure can. Well, thank you. Thank you to both boards for your commitment to literacy and equity. I'm just going to share a little bit about the equity work that we've been engaged in at 202 during the pandemic. It's been quite the year. Given the racial disparities of COVID-19 and its impact on communities of color, as well as the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. So we've done a number of things as a community to begin to speak to the world around us over the past 12 months. This past fall, all ETA staff received information at the beginning of the semester that listed tips and suggestions on how to navigate the issues that could surface during enhanced e-learning using an equity lens. The communication explored how to approach disparities in accessibility to physical space and technologies to encourage full engagement in synchronous and asynchronous learning, and various levels of comfort with turning on video during live learning. We shared information about video classism and why some students may not want to turn their cameras on, and really talking with the teachers and giving them resources to really think about the implications behind that. Educators were encouraged to be creative at assessing student engagement. Making learning accessible for students was also, with diverse learning styles, was also a priority, and accommodations, individualized learning plans By familiarizing themselves with Zoom and Google Meet accountability features, screen fatigue and how to incorporate breaks and activities throughout live learning that could also act as a buffer. Our staff also engaged in mandatory training on how to build relationships through the screen. My office built an anti-racist toolkit for educators. It is a resource toolkit addressing the current issues related to the pandemic and social justice movements. The toolkit is comprised of articles, podcasts, TED Talks, and social media accounts that follow and center Black and Brown voices. It encourages an anti-racist mindset, and it provides opportunities for action. The toolkit is for educators interested in enhancing their understanding of what is happening in our country to better engage conversations with students with an anti-racist lens. The toolkit includes a variety of resources that address the following: the history of Black liberation movement and how it shows up today, the intersections of race, poverty, and the pandemic, resources about the efficacy of protests and how to safely engage in actions, the impact of language when we are processing various events and topics, and how do we talk about certain things like the attack on the Capitol. The importance of intersectionality in all liberation and justice movements, how white men engage in radical self and community care, Black joy as an act of resistance, the difference between calls to reform, defund, and abolish policing and the prison industrial complex, BIPOC, that is Black, Indigenous, people of color, solidarity, and white co-conspiratorship, local school updates about anti-racist work in District 65 in Northwestern, nonpartisan exploration of topics related to the 2020 presidential campaign and how to appropriately navigate these conversations in the classroom setting. The toolkit also includes resources about how to engage in healthy conversations about all other topics listed above, along with racial equity glossary to ensure that everyone has a shared understanding of the terms that are frequently used and the conversations that center race. Our building leadership team is in its second year of anti-racist work with educator and consultant Corey Wallace. Guided by Corey, the team has committed itself to internalizing the courageous conversations about race protocol and identifying opportunities to decenter whiteness in their leadership and departments in alignment with the district's vision for equity. Throughout the course of the year, we've read, despite the best intentions, and I know District 65 has also done that, How Racial Inequity Thrives in Good Schools by Amanda Lewis and John Diamond. The BLT has also incorporated student voice into their work and how to support students with remote learning. Student leaders shared their feedback from a student survey about e-learning. Meetings have led to a creation of an equity essentials document that consists of books, articles, movies, podcasts, websites, and speakers recommended by team members. Another component to our work this year has been Calvin Terrell. Calvin is a longtime partner of ETHS and has facilitated and co-designed anti-racist professional development with students since 2013. He has led an all-staff meeting in response to the call to continue offering spaces where vulnerability, reflection, and care are prioritized. I can't emphasize enough that when our staff had an opportunity to meet with Calvin in the fall, we all came together and we listened to him really talk to us about the human toll of the pandemic on the racial reckoning that was happening in America. And after that session, about 100 folks, or just more than 100 folks, just hung back and cried. And a lot of people shared their thoughts and their feelings, and some people just cried. And we stood in solidarity with our tears. And there have been many, many staff meetings this school year where our teachers and our other staff members have just been very vulnerable. Because this has been definitely a difficult year for them as well. And Calvin has created spaces for healing where he have offered words of encouragement and allowed time and space to process the multitude of things happening in the world, and has centered staff and have asked them what they needed. As part of the Wildcat Future series, Calvin hosted hosted a virtual family night where he discussed relevant topics for all families, community members being in conflict. communication, bullying, violence prevention, community building, diversity awareness to social consciousness, 21st century parenting, gender equity, race, racial healing and racial justice, student achievement, and constructive decision making. This year, we've also created a district anti-racist working group. We affectionately call it the DOG, District Anti-Racist Working Group. This space was created for staff to come together to learn, examine, and reflect and take actionable steps to enhance their racial equity lens and their professional sphere of influence. Participation in the group was voluntary and included anyone who was interested in staying connected and committed to anti-racist growth, learning, and action. Beginning in the fall, we began a partnership with Dr. Jackie Battaloria, a speaker and author and consultant from our community, who facilitated the learning and development for this group for free, by the way. Dr. Battaloria had held a series of meetings that helped lay the foundation needed to concretize whiteness and how it shows up in our practice. Jackie Battaloria is the author of Birth of a White Nation, the intervention of white people and its relevance today, and she lives in Evanston. The arc of the learning for the first semester included understanding whiteness and how it is seamlessly reproduced today, identifying opportunities to implement changes that fracture these norms. And just a couple of weeks ago, the Black Student Summit was held, and staff and students were invited for an interview between ETHS alum Nia Williams and author, political strategist, and organizer Alicia Garza, who is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter and the Black Futures Project, as well as a Q&A hosted by the student union leaders. The recording of this segment has been available to all ETHS staff. During the day, students had an opportunity to sign up for various workshops, including navigating social media during the pandemic, Black resistance and community work, factors that impact the mental health of Black youth, along with strategies for self-care. Students also had an opportunity to attend intersectional affinity spaces for girls, student athletes, a boys group, students with biracial identity, and an LGBTQIA affinity space. 500 copies of Alicia Garza's new book, The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart, were given to our students and staff, along with summit t-shirts designed by an ETHS student class of 2022. Black History Month is also currently happening, and this year's theme of celebration is Know It, Show It, Become It, 365 days a year. That is being Black, 365. It is a month-long celebration that kicked off with a virtual Spirit Week that invited staff and students to show their HBCU college pride, share their favorite African-American heroes, and celebrate the influence of Black culture and fashion. The celebration continued with Black Student Summit conversations about mental health, healing, movie nights, The Hate You Give, and Black Panther were two movies that were shown. Video and series including fun fitness sessions, cookouts, soul food, dessert, and Evanston-owned Black businesses, and 100 copies of Angie Thomas's Concrete Rose were given to ETHS staff members. And I'm getting to the end here, just wanted to highlight that we've been in the global pandemic, but we've been still doing a lot with equity. Myself, Dr. Pete Bavis, Carrie Levy, and Lauren Hamilton developed and facilitated a virtual workshop as a part of the Learning Forward Conference in December 2020. The theme of this year's conference was Innovate for Impact, and the invited presenters were submitted proposals that highlighted innovative solutions educators have taken to perform professional learning practices, systems, and policies in an effort to ensure students have access to high quality learning. ETHS administrators delivered a presentation entitled Transformation for Racial Equity, a curriculum review process. The goals of the session were outlined and accepted by the proposal. Hello, and Pat Savage-Williams was a part of that as a participant. The participants acquired an understanding of how a school district maintains accountable to its commitment to racial equity within the context of an ongoing in-depth analysis for courses for the purpose of curriculum vision and change. Our participants also explored and developed how to sustain a non-traditional curriculum review process that centers students as research participants as well as research partners. The workshop focused on identifying opportunities for other people within their own districts and organization to engage in adaptive racially and transformation work specific to ensuring that curricular instructional designs of courses supports the success of all students, particularly students of color. It was also designed for folks to reflect or as district leaders to lead racial equity transformation by completing a self-evaluation that helps them identify the strengths and opportunities for growth. And after this workshop, we got an email back saying that from some researchers saying that they wanted our workshop to be written up to be submitted to a peer-reviewed journal. It doesn't happen often where us practitioners get an opportunity to submit something to the literature. So that was very good nice to get that nod. And lastly, there's just more summits to come, more conversations to be had. And, we're excited about the work that we're doing and continue to do. So that's our update from 202. Thank you.
Awesome. That's awesome, Marcus. I just want to add that the board has been working also with Dr. Darnisa. So we've been doing that. That's ongoing, and we will continue to schedule meetings with her because it is very important work for us to do. It's important for the board to stay engaged in this work together, learn aside of our colleagues at District 202, but also do our own work and work collectively. So thank you. All right. Pause for questions, or should we move forward?
Can I give you just a little bit of an update for us?
Yes, of course.
Marcus's list was very impressive and inspiring. And so I just want to add a little bit of, I guess, the duality of where our lives are right now, where equity is concerned. One part of it is somewhat a back to the basics, right? Really trying to think about what healthy racial engagement looks like. And so many of you may know our colleague, Devon Alexander, joined our district this year, is obviously experiencing what a first year looks like, but in the middle of the pandemic. And so the other part of his work really centered around a lot of the family and the community engagement. So what I think I want to highlight is not only a back to basics around our racial equity work, but also putting equity into action and trying to ensure that we are moving into our what now, what next phase, because I do think that the investments that both of our organizations have made in terms of racial equity literacy is obviously to be admired, but yet we've all been feeling like, what do we do with this information, or now that we are, how does this impact what students' lives are like in the classroom? And so that's part of what our work has been centered on. Devon came in with some really robust programs and plans and ideas. And they were centered on a couple of things. One, really continuing the work with cabinet and leadership in terms of some really racial equity, authentic leadership development. And again, with the piece of how does this impact my practice? He's been doing some work with the Dr. Karen Mapp program to really just ensure that not only from a community partner and partnership, but that it's a two-way. If you know Dr. Mapp's work, it's really about an asset-based partnership for both family engagement as well as district partnership. And so that has implications for us as well, as we more so now than ever find ourselves in our families' homes and them finding themselves in our classrooms. So that work is definitely being highlighted for us this year. We also are seeing some work in terms of, I think we've referenced our Miracles framework, but we have some partnerships in terms of our professional development with student achievement partners. We've been working with them for a while. We also redesigned our professional learning this year. And so educators have an option to have choice in terms of their professional development. And we thought that was critical for moving our racial equity work into practice, being where people are investing in how it impacts their instruction. And so we've got a small cohort, a mighty but willing group that is working on, it's called What Now, What Next? And they are literally investing in action research that is looking to develop the PLC framework, but from their own personal inquiry cycle about their practice and their work with students. And so we're excited about the work that Devon and Dr. Pitts are actually doing with student achievement partners in that regard. The cabinet team and administration has been recently partnered with it's called an IDI, so an intercultural development inventory. We've been intrigued a lot about how we measure the impact of our racial equity literacy. And so in starting this partnership, it began with an inventory and followed up with some conversations just in terms of where we are on our own personal journey. So I agree with Pat in totality. This is such an ongoing experience that you have to continue to fill your bucket and fill your toolkit. And so we've done that work as well and engaging in that partnership. And one other thing, the panorama survey that we were given this year really afforded us an opportunity to explore belongingness and the impact of our work with our students from their perspective. So if you would think of the 5 essentials as kind of a culture and climate assessment for the health of the organization, Panorama lets us drill down a little bit more into student voice around issues of belonging. And so we had our first data dive from that information. And so again, blending a little bit of let's just go back to the basics. How are we ingraining ourselves in the Courageous Conversation protocol? But now how does it apply to our practice? And what are those steps that we're taking in terms of how we organize ourselves to see that change being implemented? And so those are just a few of the highlights. Dr. Horton can talk a little bit more about some more action-oriented work that is work that's been in the making for us in relation to not only our social studies curricular rewrite project, but also our math acceleration. And then I also want to acknowledge our board's insistence and persistence in really looking at land acknowledgements. And so we're excited to bring a topic to our next board meeting where we'll really be looking at the importance of not just the land acknowledgement, but what it means for us and our community in Evanston as well. Dr. Horton, would you like to expound more?
Yes, you've done a great job. I would say the theme from this conversation tonight in this board meeting, what I'm listening to is put it into action. And that has been our priorities, equity in action. And one of the things, the detracting of our advanced math program, we have been through a compression process. We presented to the board earlier this month. We will be working on changing a policy and redesigning. While we're not eliminating advanced math, we are opening up for opportunity. And Dr. Beardsley and her team, they've done a phenomenal job of getting us to this point to address something that's really challenging and hard. You all know very well about detracking programs in ECHS. So I'm preaching to the choir when it comes to that. I would also like to just say another piece that we're doing about action, our social studies curriculum is being rewritten right now. And with the rewrite, we are at the point where we must really speak truth about history. And so I'm just going to kind of go over just really high level so I can be quick, making sure that this is not just, telling about Black history, but really talking about how it has impacted. So if Ms. Diller was here or Stacy want to chime in, this is under Stacy as well. She's been doing a lot of work in our department. But component 1, interrogating systems of oppression. The curriculum material resources engage students in discuss and interrogate systems of oppression. I can't read as fast as Pete, but I'll try. Component 2, recognize the students as individuals. Our curriculum materials and resources will recognize students as individuals within the context of their families and their communities. Component 3, prioritizes historically marginalized students. We will prioritize historically marginalized students in this section. There's so much more that I'm skipping through that I can't read to you all because it'll take all night. Curriculum materials and resources are leveraged for student activism. That's component 4, leveraging the student voice and the activism. Component 5, include diversity and representation. Curricular resources will help students to realize diversity in character and accuracy of portrayal. And we want to be sure that our students learn that diversity is more than just, we want it to be more than just counting people. We want to make people count. And that's what we are in that area where we're trying to target. Social justice orientation. Again, understanding of decolonization, power and privilege, center multiple perspectives, and connect students' learning to real life action. Component 7 uses culturally sensitive, fair, and unbiased assessments. Component 8, engage students in a range of anti-bias, multicultural, and social justice issues. And under component for teacher materials resources represents artists of diverse identities, race, ethnicity, gender, and other identities if possible. These are just the frames in which our curriculum is being rewritten and redesigned. We are working extremely hard to bring this to our curriculum committee. We plan to have something for the board in very late spring or early summer for them to approve, and that is part of the work. Something that I will be remiss if I don't discuss around our equity journey is that this summer we hired a diversity hiring specialist. And what we've done, we wrote a grant for ISB, and we were awarded the grant this summer, and we are building our own teacher residency. We don't have a teacher shortage in our district, but we do have a teacher diversity shortage. And so with the teacher residency, it's called CREATE. We're in partnership with Northwestern University and National Louis University, where we will identify individuals that are diverse. We wrote this and got it approved from the state, diverse candidates that look like our students. We will they will get accepted into the program. They'll get a master's in a year. I'm giving you the highs of it. They'll be trained at either King Arts, Betsy Rhodes, or JEH Early Childhood Center. You heard me mention that earlier in my discussion. And we'll have 20 a year. And they'll finish, and we'll pay them a $30,000 stipend. And we have partnerships from some really strong philanthropists here in the community to help us do this. And they'll graduate, and we'll be able to place some extremely diverse teachers that's trained by us, for us, the old FUBU logo, to really get into the classrooms, and we'll place them in cohort models so that we won't just have one teacher here and one teacher there. They'll be put together. We all know, if you're familiar with Hattie's work, John Hattie, he speaks about teacher efficacy. We know that putting teachers together to have a like mind, that believe that students can change, we have a lot of those teachers right now in our district, but many of our teachers are at the age where they're able to retire. We want to replace them with teachers that can carry on the legacy and continue to do great for our Black and brown students. So that is just some of the things we want to say around our equity in action here in 65.
Super. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Green, Dr. Horton, Dr. Campbell. All right, board. Questions, comments? Pat, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just want to just take a moment and say, and it sounds like we could say this about both districts, but certainly with the work at ETHS, it isn't to be ignored that in a time when the world literally went crazy, you all stayed focused on what matters. And obviously there is an equity component to COVID, but I think there are people, there are organizations, and there are school districts who probably said, oh, we have so much to do on COVID. We'll do equity later. And I am just so proud that it is so a part of our culture now that would never be remotely a thought or an option. And that not only did the work, our summits go to remote, but that you've advanced so much work and that you've integrated, it's so woven in. It's like it isn't this separate bucket. And I just want to stop and say that out loud, because that is not the norm in most school districts. Even ones that are trying, they're not there yet. And so I just am really proud of all of you and all the work that you do, that you've done to get us here, and that you do to keep us going in such a profound way. So under really crazy conditions. So thank you. I just want to make sure we don't miss that, because this conversation that you all just had That is very unusual in this country. And I just want to make sure we all recognize that. So thank you all for your amazing work.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, Pat. That is extremely important, very true, and extremely important to highlight at a time like this, especially. It's important anyway, but it's really important to highlight at a time like this. And it is what makes Evanston different. So, not to be taken for granted. So thank you. And I appreciate the information, the reports, and the work of the faculty and staff in doing this. This is probably the most difficult part of our work, to do this alongside everything else. You've heard me say before that at ETHS, we're past the presentations and the training, and we're into the doing, the implementation, and it is so much harder because everything we do now has to be done with an equity lens. It's just harder, but it's really important to do.
I just wanted to comment really quickly, and as we think about equity and have the conversation about equity, right? One of the things always is to remember that, again, our children, I always take the bioecological view of children, is that their children are couched by families and are couched by communities and other institutions, right? And whatever we can do to continue, again, as COVID-19 has exposed, there's still such a need for us to continue to collaborate with one another, which is why I appreciate these joint meetings, as well as, working with our institution and community partners, community-based organizations, to make sure that we are really identifying whatever, not only what our students need, what families need, because we know that whatever the issues that children are dealing with at home, actually they bring into our classrooms or bring into our virtual classrooms, right? And one of the things I want to point out, and I said this at our last D65 meeting, is that, again, I know we have a lot of parents who are very upset, and rightfully so, as I am, for not being able to come back to school or have our kids back in school. And I know at D65 we started a hybrid model, but again, many of us in the community who, again, want our schools to open right away and open up fully. There's an equal amount of folks who don't have the time to tell us that they are deathly afraid to send their children back to school, right? And these are people of color. These are folks who are working out there and who, again, are serving our community in grocery stores, at the laundromats, who are nurses, who, again, are seeing some, with their own eyes, some of the disparities, who have lost loved ones because they were forced to work for our comfort and to make our communities comfortable and our lives comfortable. So when I hear folks out there and sent us emails and messages around how their children are suffering, and again, I have been through that suffering prior to the COVID, right? Black and brown communities and poor white communities have gone through an economic pandemic, and a pandemic of lacking access to proper health care, a pandemic a pandemic of structural racism that has cut access to them, to opportunities. So again, what people are feeling, if this may be a new feeling to you, for a lot of us, this is something that we've been feeling for generations. And we just have to be I have to be super honest about that. And I hope that the folks who are reaching out to us today, now once we open schools, will continue to reach out to us to start advocating not only for us to open schools, but open opportunity and access to rigor and to success, and to normalize the success for all students, Black, brown, white, Latino, Asian, because that is what we need to do as a community. We need to come together. And again, I'm proud to work in the community and with you as colleagues. to try to make this work, and equity is something that is embedded and operationalized, and is something that is just something that becomes the nature of how this community works. And again, we have a lot of work still to do, as you're saying, Pat, but I'm here for the long haul, as long as I can contribute to the work alongside all of you.
Anya. You're muted.
Yep, got it. Thank you, Sergio. I am hopeful in knowing that we are, two institutions that have a significant amount of care and role in folks' lives, that we are centering, witnessing and caring for the full humanity of all of the children and families that we're working with. As Sergio mentioned, there are many of us who have had to live most of our lives not being fully witnessed, not being fully cared for, and not having our full humanity protected and cherished. And it's hopeful to hear that we have two major institutions in our local community doing that. I wanted to just also note that the District 65 administration team has been centering racial equity around our reopening plans, with making sure that we reserve spots for the individuals who preference in person, who are vulnerable. And also with our discussions around resolving the structural deficit. I think that, these are processes and plans that, if they're undertaken without a specific racial equity lens, will default to the most privileged. And, it's important, if we are telling people that their lives do matter and that we do owe some repair to them, that we do the extra work and the extra labor of doing our work through a racial equity lens. And it's not easy in terms of the practical work. It's not always easy to undertake politically either. And that has meant that we have had to deal with threats and misunderstanding, and engage, extra energy in educating and communicating. But it's worthwhile, and it's what our children and families deserve, all of them. And I'm heartened by the work that we are doing. I'm heartened and hopeful for the incredible impact that all of the children who are able to benefit from this work, that they will have on the future. They are going to be incredible. They are going to take these seats, and they are going to soar, and they're going to take the world by storm when it is their turn. So thank you all for being partners in this work. Thank you to the administrative teams that are taking on an incredibly complex and unprecedented task.
Thank you. All right. So we will continue with our agenda. I'd like to keep it moving. So we're at item number 7, District 65 action items. Anya, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think, Sula, you have the motion.
I move that the Board of Education accept the recommendations outlined in the attached group motion and approve the personnel appointments, leaves, and separations, January 2021 Board of Education meeting minutes, destruction and release of January 2019 closed session meeting minutes and recordings, December 2020 list of bills, budget amendment and treasurer's report, student fees for FY22, and student transportation fees for FY22.
Second.
Lindsay Ryan,
Yes.
Mendoza,
Yes.
Cartha,
Yes.
Halpern, Kim,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Tanya Rudy.
Yes.
Thank you. So District 202, anybody say something? Okay. Consent agenda, which consists of approval of acceptance of foundation funding for the band tower, approval of minutes from February 8th, 2011, closed session meeting, approval of minutes for February 8th regular meeting, treasurer's report from December 2020, approval of bills, personnel agenda, appointments to staff, support staff, change of status, and stipends. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Laude,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Mansell,
Yes.
Parsons,
Yes.
Rolowitz,
Yes.
Gutierrez,
Yes.
Savage Williams.
Yes. Thank you. All right. So we're at adjournment. Anya, District 65.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Okay, great. Yeah, with no further business before the board, we adjourn. Sorry, I can't see my clock at 10:21.
And District 202. Can I have a motion for adjournment, please?
Move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.
Night.
Thank you all. Good
Good night,
night.
everyone.
Really good to see everybody.